Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Denise Amber Lee. Nathan and Denise's family lives in the SRO Soda District, located near the west coast of Florida. They started dating in their senior year of high school. Nathan is a talented athlete. He is very funny and often makes people laugh. Denise, on the other hand, is very calm. She is known for being smart and kind. On their first Valentine's Day together, Nathan gave Denise a heart-shaped ring. Soon after, the couple got married and settled in a quiet area in Latura Venue, where they rented a house. By 2008, the couple had 2 children, Noah, 2 years old, and Adam, 6 months old. Nathan worked 3 jobs to provide for the family, while Denise focused on running the household. She loved her children and her husband very much. Although the economy was difficult at times, the couple was still happy together. Thursday, January 17, 2008, Nathan left for work early that morning. Around 11:00 a.m., during his break, he called his wife and they talked for about 5 minutes while Noah was cutting his hair on the back porch. They talked about the nice weather, and Nathan asked Denise to open the windows to let in some fresh air. She told him that she had already done so. Everything was normal, and there were no problems. After hanging up, Nathan went back to work and finished his shift at 3:00 p.m. He then called Denise back to let her know that he was on his way home, but there was no answer. During the drive home, he tried to call her 8 more times. When Nathan got home, he found all the windows closed. Denise was not home. He found her keys and phone on the living room sofa. Like most people, Denise would never leave the house without those items, especially when there were small children home alone. Nathan found the 2 boys lying side by side in their upstairs crib. There was no sign of forced entry or struggle, and since the children were too young to understand what had happened, he sensed something was wrong. At 3:29 p.m., Nathan called the police and reported the situation. He told them he was in Northport at the Latura Venue and had just returned from work. He realized his wife was missing and he couldn't find her. The children were with him, but he had no information on where she might be, despite a thorough search of the house. Soon after, the police arrived at Nathan's house. The officers began knocking on neighbors' doors to see if anyone had noticed anything unusual. To everyone's surprise, a valuable lead emerged. Around 2:00 p.m., Jennifer Eckhart, a neighbor, was watching television when she saw a dark green Chevrolet slowly driving down the street. The car drove around the front of her house about 5 times. The car stood out because of its distinctive black front liner, which was added to protect it from minor damage. The neighbor sensed something was wrong and stepped into the front yard just as the car pulled into Nathan and Denise's driveway. Jennifer stared at the driver, thinking he was just looking for a house and had finally found it. Feeling reassured, she went back inside to watch TV. However, after about 10 minutes, she stepped outside again just as the car drove away. Although she did not catch a glimpse of the passenger, she carefully observed the driver's face and later gave the police a brief description of him. After calling 911, Nathan reached out to Rick Goform, a police officer in nearby Charlotte County. Within 30 minutes, Rick organized a large search for Denise, involving officers, search dogs, patrol units, and even a helicopter. The Northport area was put on alert. Denise was declared missing, and posters were distributed to raise awareness of her disappearance. Local police were instructed to closely monitor a dark green Chevrolet and its driver, described as a chubby white man in his 30s. More than 2 hours passed without any sign of Denise or any other clues to aid the search. At 6:14 p.m., police received a call from Denise. She said she was in a car that was being taken somewhere. She informed police that she did not know the kidnapper, gave her full name, and mentioned the street where she lived. The police attempted to trace the call. Unfortunately, Since the call was made from an old phone without GPS, they were unable to pinpoint the exact location. However, they were able to identify the registrant of the number as Michael Lee King, a 36-year-old man. Michael was recently divorced and was raising his 12-year-old son on his own. It is important to note that he has a low IQ of around 76, which makes him mentally retarded. He was in a childhood accident when he was 6 years old. He suffered a serious brain injury while skiing. Despite these challenges, Michael has lived a normal life and has never had any legal problems. Denise gave her name and home address in the call to the police, and the police immediately forwarded this information. The recording of the call was passed on to Denise's father, who recognized his daughter's voice, confirming that she was in danger. It was clearly Michael who had kidnapped Denise. During the call, Michael mentioned his cousin, Harold. Suddenly, after Denise's call ended at 18:23, the police received another call from Harold's 17-year-old daughter, Sabrina. Sabrina said that her uncle Michael stopped by to visit her father, and a woman jumped out of his car. Michael pushed her in. Then he borrowed a shovel and a can of gasoline from Harold. At around 6:00 p.m., Michael did indeed show up at his cousin Harold's house. He parked his car on the side of the road. He asked for gas, a flashlight, and a shovel. He explained that the lawnmower had gotten stuck in the mud in front of his house. As Harold was handing him some things, they heard a woman screaming in distress from the car. Harold asked Michael what was going on, but Michael dismissed it, saying that Harold didn't need to worry. Michael then got into the driver's seat and drove away quickly. Initially, Harold thought that he might have just witnessed a family argument between Michael and his new girlfriend. However, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling about the situation. To avoid making a mistake, Harold decided to go home first to see if Michael was okay. When he arrived, Michael wasn't there, and he wasn't in the front yard either. Meanwhile, their daughter, Sabrina, was worried about the uncut lawn, which prompted her to call the police. Police became concerned when they learned about the items Michael had taken from Harold, prompting them to intensify their search. At 6:30 p.m., just 7 minutes after Sabrina's call, 911 operator received another call from Jane Kowalski, who was driving south on the freeway. She noticed something disturbing. She reported that while stopped at a red light on Chamberlain Street, another driver pulled up next to her, and she heard a woman screaming loudly from inside the car. Jane described the car as blue, like a Chevrolet from the early 2000s. The driver was a light-skinned man, and there was a woman in the back seat who was screaming and banging on the windows. Jane then reported that the driver was about to turn left, and the dispatcher advised Jane to follow him closely and keep an eye on him. Moments later, Jane reported that the man accelerated away, making a sharp left turn onto Taldeblay, leaving her no time to react. Now, she was unsure if she could catch up with him because of the heavy traffic on the highway, which made driving very difficult. Jane believes she witnessed a kidnapping. She accurately described the driver and the make of the car. However, she got the color of the car wrong. She mistook green for blue. She observed a man turning the steering wheel with one hand while pressing the head of someone in the back seat with the other. She heard someone screaming and banging on the window. Jane then caught up with Michael's Chevrolet, and both cars remained stationary for a while, waiting for the red light. Eventually, Jane began to move, and Michael changed lanes to follow her. Jane deliberately drove slowly, thinking that the Chevrolet driver would pass her, allowing her to follow. But at that moment, Michael also slowed down and turned towards Mishtar 75. Jane then called the 911 operator and provided the location of Michael's car. But the situation then took a tragic and unexpected turn. Jane provided information to the 911 operator about the location of the kidnapper's car. However, officers were never dispatched to the location she provided. A recording of Jane's conversation with the operator shows the office was very noisy. The operator relayed the information to two dispatchers, while loudly expressing frustration with them. Both dispatchers admitted to receiving the information, but did not send patrol units to the designated area. The dispatchers later explained that Jane's call came during a shift change and that they were understaffed at the time. The dispatchers were eventually suspended without pay. A search helicopter and several patrol units were on standby, but no one informed them of the exact location of Michael's car. The next day, Jane saw a photo of Michael on the news and immediately recognized him as the driver she had seen the day before. She reached out to the police, introducing herself as the woman who had called 911 the previous day, and asked if they needed any more information. To her surprise, the officers were unaware of her call and did not know who she was. Now, let's go back to the day before when Denise was still in the car. At 5:50 p.m., 20 minutes after Jane's call, 911 received a fifth call. Michael's cousin, Harold, reported that he wasn't sure what the problem was, but it sounded like someone needed medical assistance. He mentioned a green 1995 Chevrolet and indicated that a woman inside the car appeared to need help. Chevrolet called from a payphone and shared all the details, but he didn't want to reveal his identity. His information largely matched what his daughter Sabrina had provided. Over the next 2 hours, the officers found no leads. At 21:16, Officer Edward Pope was on Tala de Blaze Street when he saw a green Chevrolet speeding and making a sharp turn to the south. The officer pursued the car and managed to block it with his own vehicle, causing Michael to crash. After the accident, Officer Edward ordered Michael out of the car. After Michael got out of the car, he was soaked to the waist, and his boots were covered in mud. In his pocket, the police found the phone that Denise had used to call 911, but it had lost its battery. The police checked the back seat of the car, but found no sign of Denise. The Chevrolet Camaro was towed by the Nord Port Authority for a detailed inspection. Inside the vehicle, officers discovered a SIM card and a gasoline canister. The back seat and a blanket showed signs of staining. Denise's fingerprints were found on the exterior of the driver's window. On the front of the car, there were blood spatters, hair strands, and a strange, thick substance. Additionally, hair that had been pulled out was found stuffed in a pocket behind the driver's seat, along with Denise's heart-shaped ring, which she had always worn and never removed. Police believe Denise intentionally left this evidence to help ensure her kidnapper was caught. Michael was identified as the primary and sole suspect in the kidnapping. He refused to confess, would not reveal any information about Denise's whereabouts, and maintained his innocence. During interrogation, he remained silent. Michael's cousin Harold went to the police station to convince Michael to reveal to Denise's family where he had hidden her. Michael eventually spoke up and claimed that he and Denise had been intimate. He said that they had been held hostage by a group of masked criminals who eventually killed Denise. With a search warrant for Michael's home, the police thoroughly examined it and discovered a blanket with white spots and some blood on it. DNA testing confirmed that the blood was Michael's. In the bedroom and kitchen, pieces of adhesive tape with hair attached were discovered. The DNA from the hair roots matched that of Denise. On January 18, the day after Denise went missing, a canine unit searched the area near Blaze Street. Searchers found 2 piles of sand with visible blood. They then excavated and discovered Denise's body buried 3 feet deep in a swampy grave. She suffered a gunshot wound to the head. A cartridge case was found nearby in the grass. Denise's stained underwear and shirt were also found. DNA analysis confirmed that the biological material matched Michael's DNA. Denise's autopsy results showed that she died from head injuries. Blood and hair found outside Michael's car indicated that the car was close by when Denise was shot. Additionally, aspirin was found in Denise's lungs, indicating that she was alive and breathing for some time after the injury. She fought valiantly for her life, suffering numerous wounds and bruises while defending herself against Michael. Marks on her wrists indicated that she had been bound by Michael. Her hair and 2 pieces of duct tape were recovered, along with biological material from Michael found at the scene. Michael was on trial for first-degree murder, rape, and kidnapping, but he pleaded not guilty to all charges. His lawyers attempted to paint him as a hard-working single father with no prior legal issues. The defense said a childhood accident in which he injured his frontal lobe while skiing is believed to have affected his behavior. His family noted that Michael's attitude changed dramatically after this incident. When he was 13, he nearly killed his brother with a bow and arrow while imitating a cartoon character. After his childhood accident, he needed special education services for children with low IQs. Michael experienced severe headaches and constant ringing in his ears. A friend testified in court that in the days leading up to the abduction, Michael showed signs of paranoia, claiming that neighbors were spying on him through his windows. The defense attorneys pointed out that individuals who have suffered frontal lobe injuries are more prone to making mistakes, taking unnecessary risks, struggling with aggression control, and having trouble distinguishing between reality and fantasy. Comprehensive cognitive tests confirmed that Michael had a very low IQ. However, he still understood the concepts of actions and their consequences. Michael's defense arguments quickly weakened, especially with the shocking blood and DNA evidence presented against him in court. Additional evidence, including hair strands and Denise's heart-shaped ring hidden in a seat pocket. Family Michael's younger brother Jim took on the responsibility of raising Michael's son, who was 13 at the time. The boy needed psychological support to cope with his mother's abandonment and the impact of his father's actions. Denise's family sued Charlotte County police dispatchers for serious misconduct in the case. The case was settled out of court for $1 million. A few months after Denise's death, her husband, Nathan, established the Denise Amber Lee Foundation. He spent the next several years traveling the country, advocating for standardized training for emergency dispatchers. His dedication to this cause is truly admirable. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Annie Tayan. Annie Tayan was born on May 1, 1965, in Charleston, South Carolina, and was raised by her mother. She had a strong love for life, dancing, fun, and the simple pleasures it brought. Annie dreamed of having a family and considered motherhood her greatest goal. She began this journey very early, giving birth to her first son, Jemia, at the age of 18, followed by her second son, Sean, just a year later. By the age of 20, she welcomed her third child, a daughter named Shane. Unfortunately, shortly after Shane was born, the children's father left Annie, became uninvolved in their lives, and abandoned the family. Annie faced the hardships of raising 3 young children in a rented apartment in Maine. In 1987, when her youngest daughter Shane was only 6 months old, Annie, 22, met Michael Palin, 32, a Navy officer stationed on the aircraft carrier Bramby. Their meeting took place in Portland, Maine, where Michael's ship was docked, and he felt an immediate attraction to Annie during their waterfront encounter. Michael lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and was a respected member of the Navy, known for his work as a computer systems operator. He was actively involved in military operations and had received several awards. Annie was fascinated by Michael's naval career and quickly fell in love with him, telling a friend that she had found a man she felt was truly worthy of her love. After dating for a few months, Annie and Michael decided to move in together, creating a family with 2 sons and a daughter. Unfortunately, their life together took a tragic turn when a fire broke out in their apartment. Annie was away at the time, leaving Michael with the children. Michael, along with Jemia and Sean, were able to escape, but Shane, who was too young to walk, was left behind. When Annie returned, she tried to enter the burning apartment to save Shane, but the neighbors prevented her. The loss of Shane in a fire had a profound effect on Annie. After the devastating fire, Annie and her sons moved to her mother's house in Portland. Meanwhile, Michael focused on his work and decided to stay in the barracks. A few months after the move, a disturbing event occurred near Annie's mother's house. A shed in the backyard was set on fire. The police quickly traced the source of the fire and found a lighter engraved with the name Bramby, the ship on which Michael served. This discovery made Michael the prime suspect in the arson case. However, despite the incriminating evidence, the police were unable to link him to the crime due to insufficient evidence. After the second fire, Maine child welfare authorities discovered that Annie's sons were living in unsafe conditions with her. As a result, they made the decision to remove Jemia and Sean from her custody and place them in the care of the Department of Social Services. This decision devastated Annie, who tried her best to regain custody of her children. But she was unsuccessful and lost custody of her sons. When Michael's ship returned to Charleston, South Carolina, he settled into a rental apartment and reunited with Annie. Despite their complicated past, Annie decided to move in with him in Goose Creek, a suburb of Charleston. However, while there, Annie discovered a photo of Michael wearing a wedding ring, revealing that he was married. When confronted, Michael confessed to Annie that he had been married but was now divorced. He explained that his ex-wife, Dawn Breeze, and their 3 children lived with his mother in Savannah, Georgia. Although Michael assured Annie that he was no longer in a relationship with Dawn, Annie was deeply troubled by this revelation. She considered leaving him but ultimately chose to stay, seeing Michael as a partner with whom to start a family. However, their living situation became negative. Michael became increasingly hostile and disrespectful to Annie. As she considered moving back to her mother's home, she discovered she was pregnant. This unexpected news kept her from leaving and brought her joy as she anticipated the birth of another child. In October 1989, Annie gave birth to her 4th daughter, Jade. Although she knew Jade could never replace her lost daughter, she felt that Jade filled an important void in her heart. In the month after Jade was born, Michael's treatment of Annie worsened. He began publicly insulting and humiliating her. Annie confided to a friend that she feared that if she tried to leave, Michael would relentlessly pursue her. His controlling behavior increased. He locked Annie in their apartment. When he left for work, he would disconnect his phone and take it with him. Annie became increasingly concerned about his actions. Annie, feeling distressed, called her best friend Katie French. During the call, Annie revealed that she was planning to leave Michael. However, Michael threatened that if she left, their daughter Jade would stay with him and Annie would never see her again. Overwhelmed, Annie cried and begged Katie to come immediately to help her and Jade. Unfortunately, Katie was busy and unable to help. Instead, she sent Annie money for a bus ticket, hoping that it would help her escape and return to Portland. This urgent conversation turned out to be their last. 2 days later, on November 7, 1989, Katie tried to contact Annie but received no response. A few days later, Michael informed Katie that Annie had left on November 6, taking her belongings and heading to an unknown destination. Katie expected Annie to contact her from her new home, but after 2 weeks of no news, she grew increasingly worried. By Thanksgiving, November 24, Annie had been out of contact for 20 days. Worried about Annie's safety, Katie tried to contact Annie's friends and acquaintances, but no one had any information about her. When Katie tried to report Annie Tayan, 24, missing to the police, she was told that she could not file a formal report because she was not a family member. As months passed without any updates on Annie, Katie finally contacted Michael's mother. Katie was shocked to learn that Annie's youngest daughter, Jade, was living with Michael's mother. The news confirmed Katie's deepest fears. She was certain that Annie would never willingly leave her daughter behind. Shortly after the disturbing events, Michael Palin moved to the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. He did not appear to be concerned about her disappearance. Michael did not contact the police or begin a search for Annie. The official search began after Annie's mother reported her missing. Initially, the investigation focused on her husband Michael Palin, who quickly became the prime suspect. Michael explained that on the morning of November 6th, he woke up to find Annie had left, leaving their daughter with him. Michael said that the night before, Annie had mentioned that she wanted to end their relationship. Michael did not look for Annie because he thought their relationship was over and felt no need to contact her any further. He also claimed that he was unaware of Annie's disappearance. After searching the couple's rented apartment, the police found no evidence. Annie Tayan's case seemed to have stalled, with no further search for her. Questions about her current location, whether she was still alive, and the possible motives of any kidnappers remain unanswered. The only known fact is that the last person confirmed to have seen her was her partner, Michael. For 4 long years, there was no news or sign of Annie. Her best friend, Katie French, was the only one actively looking for her. She worked tirelessly on the investigation, and her phone bill alone cost her approximately $16,000. Katie hired a private investigator and was determined to continue the search. She contacted various organizations to gather information about Michael's background. Katie was convinced that Michael was dangerous and untrustworthy. She was terrified of him, knowing that if Michael learned of her ties to the police, it could put her in danger. In 1993, Annie's case was transferred to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, marking a major change in the investigation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents began a comprehensive review of the case from the beginning. They found Michael Palin, who was staying at Pearl Harbor Naval Base in Hawaii. When Coast Guard agents attempted to speak with him about Annie's disappearance, Michael agreed to speak only if his attorney was present. He then completely stopped cooperating with the investigation and refused to provide any further assistance or information. The Coast Guard agents gathered all available information about Annie's disappearance and contacted the South Carolina Police Department. They asked the department to cross-reference their records with any unidentified bodies, noting that Annie had given birth just a month before her disappearance. South Carolina police then reported a case involving a dead woman who had also given birth a month before her death. They provided a sketch of what the woman looked like, shocking the Coast Guard agents. They believed they had found Annie Tayan. The discovery revealed a brutal murder, with her body found next to a highway in Jasper County, South Carolina, about 100 miles from her home with Michael. The crime scene photos were horrifying. Annie's face was severely crushed, and her skull was broken into 124 pieces, requiring nearly 500 hours of detailed reconstruction. Her body was found in a duffel bag that had been doused with gasoline and set on fire. The burning bag was discovered at 6 a.m. on November 7, 1989, the same time Katie French noticed Annie had stopped answering her calls. Annie was identified by comparing her dental records to those of the unidentified woman. After Annie's body was found, Michael became the prime suspect in her murder. The Coast Guard developed a detailed investigation plan, starting with a review of his financial transactions. They discovered that on the day Annie went missing, Michael had made a credit card purchase about 25 miles south of where her body was found. Additionally, his phone records showed that on the morning of November 6th, he called his mother's home in Savannah twice, once at 4:35 a.m. and again at 5:17 a.m. Based on this evidence, police believe that Michael killed Annie in their apartment, then moved her body and left it on the side of the road, where he burned it. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents targeted Michael Palin's ex-wife, Dawn Breeze. At the time of Annie's death, Dawn was still married to Michael and lived in his mother's home in Savannah. After Annie went missing, Dawn divorced Michael and began moving around the state several times, apparently trying to avoid someone or something. Agents eventually tracked her down to Miami, Florida, in the summer of 1995, nearly 6 years after Annie Tain's murder. When they found Dawn, she was making a living through psychic activities. During a visit to her workplace to discuss Annie's disappearance, Dawn responded surprisingly calmly. She asked how long the conversation would last, saying she wanted to eat if it lasted. This response surprised the agents, as they had expected a more emotional response regarding Annie. However, Dawn remained calm throughout their discussion. During the 10-hour interrogation, Dawn's story initially matched Michael's. She said that when she visited Michael's apartment, he told her that his mistress had left and that he planned to raise their daughter on his own. However, Dawn was silent, looked down, and said that she wanted to tell the truth. Her next speech was emotionless and tearless as she shared what she had kept secret for 6 years. Dawn revealed that Michael had called her to his Charleston apartment early one morning. She discovered Annie's body on the living room floor. Michael told Dawn to go into the bedroom to see his daughter. At the time, Dawn and Michael were still legally married and had 3 children together. Michael admitted to Dawn that he had had an affair with Annie, which resulted in the birth of a daughter. He begged her to accept the child and help him raise his daughter. Dawn claimed that rather than face a custody battle with Annie, Michael chose to kill to gain custody. Dawn added, on the night of November 5th and 6th, 1989, Michael and Annie went to bed after having sex. After a while, Annie fell asleep. At this point, Michael violently attacked her with a crowbar. Their daughter, Jade, was lying next to Annie in bed during the horrific incident. Michael continued to beat Annie on the head with increasing brutality. Despite her attempts to fight back, Annie eventually died of her injuries on that same bed. Michael contacted his wife, Dawn, asking her to come immediately. He then placed Annie's body in a large bag and put it in the trunk of his car, where he also had a can of gasoline. He drove with Dawn and their daughter Jade in the back seat for about 100 miles. When they reached a quiet area on the side of the road, Michael took Annie's body out of the trunk, doused it with gasoline, and set it on fire. After making sure the fire was burning well, he quickly returned to the car and drove Dawn and Jade back to his mother's house in Savannah. Dawn's revelation was crucial evidence in the investigation. The police asked Dawn to make a recorded phone call to Michael to talk about Annie's murder. Dawn agreed and called Michael, expressing her concern about the discovery and identification of Annie's body. Michael's response was, "No, they didn't." During the call, Dawn told Michael that blood had been found in their old apartment and that Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents suspected they were involved in a murder. She encouraged Michael to come up with an explanation for the blood. Michael responded, "Okay, we need to work together and come up with a solution." Although he did not admit anything directly, his demeanor showed that he understood the seriousness of the situation. At the end of the conversation, Michael warned Dawn to be careful with her phone calls and assured her that they would work together to resolve the situation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents took Dawn to the crime scene to search for any remaining evidence. To protect her identity and ensure her safety as a cooperating witness, they disguised her before arriving at the apartment. Dawn carefully described and demonstrated where Annie's body was and the sequence of events. She pointed out a spot near the wall and baseboard where a significant amount of blood had seeped into the carpet and concrete floor below. Since Michael had moved out, the landlord had replaced and cleaned the carpet several times, which explained the lack of visible evidence. However, when the police used a special chemical on the concrete floor, a large purple stain appeared, indicating the presence of protein and confirming Dawn's account of where Annie's body had been. Despite the blood on the concrete, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents had difficulty confirming that the substance was blood, so they continued to search for more physical evidence. Dawn pointed to a nightstand containing a television next to the bed where Annie had been killed. She noted that blood had splattered on the television during the murder, and Michael had said that it needed a thorough cleaning. He had then disposed of the television, possibly selling it rather than throwing away a working appliance, given his frugal habits. Finding the television was difficult, but the agents were determined to find it. At this point, Michael Palin realized that the Naval Criminal Investigative Service was watching him, especially after a phone call with his ex-wife, Dawn. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents were concerned that Michael might flee or that he might threaten witnesses, harm them. On October 11, 1995, Michael attempted to escape, but was quickly apprehended and taken into custody by police. While Michael Palin was in police custody on suspicion of murder, Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents worked tirelessly to find and interview all the residents of the apartment complex where the murders took place in November 1989. Their efforts were rewarded when they spoke with a neighbor who said he had purchased a television from Michael. Amazingly, the television was still working and in the neighbor's home. The police quickly confiscated the television and sent it to the FBI lab for forensic analysis. This investigation led to a crucial discovery. Analysis found 11 blood stains inside the speaker. These blood samples were later compared to Annie's DNA, providing crucial evidence in the murder case. At this point in the case, Michael's attorney announced that he was willing to plead guilty, but only if the death penalty was removed from consideration. The prosecutor was not pleased with this development, but military law required such a plea bargain to be negotiated at trial. Michael admitted his guilt, recounting the details of his crimes objectively, his account showing no signs of remorse or empathy. As a result, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He was also dishonorably discharged from the Navy. Dawn Breeze, who knew about her husband's crimes and remained silent for more than 6 years, escaped legal consequences thanks to her crucial confession to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, which greatly aided the investigation. Annie's children now know the truth about their mother's tragic fate and understand that she did not abandon them. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marie Carlson. In 1974, a girl named Marie was born into an ordinary Filipino family. Concerned about her future, Marie's mother decided to send her to the United States, hoping her daughter would have a better chance at success. Marie was eventually adopted by an American military family who already had a daughter named Esther. The two girls, close in age, quickly became friends, unaware of their true relationship. Marie lived in a foster home, not knowing that her American father was her biological father. Meanwhile, Esther, the friend with whom Marie shared her games, secrets, and dreams, was actually her biological sister. Neither of them realized their blood relationship. As the two girls grew up, they decided to leave their parents' home to start a new life together in Florida. They rented a cozy apartment near a karaoke club, which quickly became their favorite SPO. Marie Carlson had an optimistic outlook on life. She loved the color pink and often used the word beautiful as a guiding principle. In Marie's beautiful world, a new meaning suddenly appeared. It was love. Marie entered a new chapter in her life when she met Jeff. They quickly fell in love, started dating, and eventually got married. Their love was symbolized by the birth of a beautiful daughter, named Paris, reflecting the love and beauty they shared. However, Jeff remained a mysterious man, with a past and family members that Marie knew nothing about. While Marie's personal life was going smoothly, she set a lofty career goal of working for the FBI. To prepare for this challenging job, she began studying criminal law. However, her path to pursuing her dream was fraught with difficulties. Every step forward in her career required great effort. In the end, despite her best efforts, Marie left the police force without accomplishing her original goal. Marie's life, which had been happy before, gradually became difficult due to a mental disorder. The root cause was severe sexual abuse she had suffered since childhood, leaving deep psychological trauma. Over time, the mental disorder became more severe, making Marie's daily life a painful ordeal. The trauma of the past had a serious impact on Marie. It not only made her lose her self-esteem but also weakened her feelings for her husband, Jeff. Their once passionate love had cooled down and was filled with disappointment. Unable to overcome the difficulties in their marriage, they decided to divorce, feeling exhausted by the pain they had gone through. The divorce, the failure of her police career, and unsuccessful attempts to find a new job took a toll on Marie. She realized that she could no longer be a good mother to her daughter. To protect Paris from the negative environment, Marie and Jeff, who cared deeply for their daughter, agreed that Jeff would have custody of her. Despite their difficult past, the divorced couple completed their divorce smoothly. Despite the lengthy legal process, both of them tried their best for their little daughter, Paris. The divorce did not cause a rift between Jeff and Marie. They remained friends, and Jeff was always there to support Marie when needed. Marie also tried to see her daughter as often as possible and never missed her birthday. Marie was searching for meaning in life. Despite the hardships she went through, she did not give up. One day, she realized that she needed faith. Marie began attending the Emerald Coast Church founded by James Flanders. From the very first words of his simple and sincere sermon, she felt welcomed and loved. Marie began her new journey in Redemption, a town in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. James and James's colleague, Tanya Flanders, were two kind people who spread warmth to everyone around them with their kindness. They built a church called the Shrine of Mercy, where people could seek help and support. One day, they helped Marie, who was having a hard time in life. For Marie, the church was not only a place of prayer but also became her real home. This place was filled with love, and people were always willing to help each other. Marie found a new family, surrounded by warm affection. She felt free like a bird that had just escaped from a cage. As the days passed, Marie gradually regained her joy in life. Her heart was filled with happiness, and a smile was always on her lips. Marie's eyes shone with new hope, reflecting not only the gentle Florida sunshine. Her health and weight improved, and her soul was filled with happiness. The church was not only a place of worship but also a caring community. Here, Marie found a second family full of love, light, and faith. On the outside, the church looked simple and humble, blending in with other urban structures. Inside, the space was cozy with simple pews. Here, time seemed to stand still, and people were united by their common faith. But, one day, Marie was pregnant. A secret she kept hidden under her loose-fitting dress. She felt ashamed and afraid, sharing it only with a few of her closest friends. In June 2021, at the age of 37, Marie gave birth to her second daughter, Grace. The news quickly spread throughout the small town. The truth about the child's father turned out to be heartbreaking. It was a man Marie had dated for a short time. He had abused her physically and mentally. When he learned that Marie was pregnant, he left without saying goodbye. After experiencing the deep trauma of abandonment, Marie found comfort and new hope in the church. There, she always received strong support. The Flanders family became loyal protectors, surrounding Marie and her young daughter Grace with care and love. They became the real family Marie had always dreamed of. She realized that she was no longer alone. After 3 months since Marie had given birth to her daughter, This should have been a time filled with joy and happiness, but Marie made a shocking decision. She posted a surprise announcement on social media. She was leaving. Not just leaving, Marie decided to cut all ties, leaving behind the city, family, and friends. Marie kept her plans a secret, not wanting anyone to doubt or interfere. She only casually mentioned her dream and expressed her feelings to her family, as if saying goodbye forever. No one knew where she was going or what she was doing. She suddenly disappeared without a trace, leaving her family extremely worried and desperate. They did not know what to do to find her. Marie's mysterious disappearance only added to their anxiety. Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, was worried when his ex-wife went missing. He decided to call the police to look for her. As each day passed, the fear of Marie's fate increased. While everyone was still talking about Marie's disappearance from Fort Walton Beach, a terrifying truth was revealed. She had left without taking her 3-month-old daughter. Marie's sister Esther immediately became suspicious. "It's not like her at all," she said, her voice shaking. She was always protective of her child. Everyone who knew Marie was shocked. She was a model mother, always tenderly caring for 7-year-old Paris. Marie's ex-husband, Jeff, was also surprised to learn that she had stopped caring to Paris. The police could not ignore the incident. When they examined Marie's recent messages, they discovered something unusual. Her writing style was very different from her previous ones. This made them suspect that Marie might have been coerced or that someone was impersonating her. An investigation was launched. Suspicions arose about the ex-boyfriend of her, due to Marie's relationship with this man seemed to be bad. Marie's disappearance remains a mystery. Even Marie's sister Esther has been unable to confirm or deny theories about the case. Police are investigating many complex aspects, including Marie's disappearance, strange text messages, and questions about ex-boyfriend of her. In interviews with the police, Tanya and James Flanders provided additional information. They said Marie had gone missing before, often leaving for periods of time and returning without explanation. The family also revealed that Marie suffered from bipolar disorder, which may have caused her sudden mood swings. A few weeks before her disappearance, Marie had fallen into a state of depression. She had started taking medication but had to stop because she was pregnant. Feeling unwell, Marie asked the Flanders to look after her daughter. After lunch, Marie went to rest, while Tanya and Grace went shopping. James came to look after Marie, but when he came, Marie and her car were nowhere to be found. The Flanders immediately began searching. They searched the streets and checked the parking lots of every building. James suddenly had the idea to check the airport. To his surprise, they found Marie's car there. James drove home with the spare key. The investigators immediately checked the car, but found no traces or suspicious evidence. In search of new information, they decided to go to the airport where Marie had left. Their plan was to review the security camera footage in the parking lot. The airport was responsible for storing this information. If they were lucky, they might find Marie's plane ticket, which might have her fingerprints on it. Although they found Marie's ticket, it was of no help to the investigation because there were no important traces on it. Marie's search efforts at the airport did not yield the expected results. A search of her car also turned up no clues, and the parking ticket had no fingerprints. Additionally, the security cameras in the parking lot were not working on the day Marie went missing, making the situation even more difficult. The police are focusing on the mysterious man who is the ex-boyfriend of Marie. Investigators returned to the church in the hope of finding clues about the father's identity and role in this complicated case. The church is abuzz with speculation about where Marie sought solace in the past. parishioners have revealed Marie's dealing with her grief. She was struggling with depression and considering abortion. However, the Flanders were against the decision. They asked Marie to keep the baby and promised to help her. The Flanders' eldest child was grown, but they were desperate for another child. Even though they were in their 40s, they were still eager for the chance to become parents again. Once again, a parishioner declared Grace a gift from heaven and was a reward for the Flanders' kindness in helping Marie. Then, Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, appeared. Although he was not the baby's father, he held an important clue. Jeff revealed that he had noticed Marie was pregnant. When asked about the baby's father, Marie lied and said she was a surrogate mother for the Flanders. So who really was Grace's father? As the investigation deepened, investigators interviewed Tanya's close friends, who were also members of the church, to learn more about the case. Initially, these friends promised Marie to keep the information confidential, but eventually, all the women were forced to reveal the truth. They all confirmed that James was Grace's biological father. It turned out to be a natural pregnancy, and James' wife, Tanya, had to accept the situation silently. This attracted the attention of investigators, leading to the Flanders family being called in for further questioning. Only Tanya appeared and confirmed the information, revealing that she had been in the room when the incident occurred. She described it as having happened with the consent of all parties involved. Tanya emphasized that the important thing in this situation was the relationship between people and higher goals, not the physical aspect. After Marie's disappearance, more terrifying information about the relationship between her, James, and Tanya gradually emerged. In fact, James not only had an affair but also had a parallel relationship with both women, similar to a form of polygamy. Once, they even celebrated the child's birthday together and took a photo, in which James, Tanya, and Marie posed as a happy family. This photo was intended to prove that the ceremony was only to honor Tanya, not related to Marie. However, after investigation and interviews with Tanya's friends, new information came to light that clarified the situation. Although Tanya said Marie was satisfied with her current relationship, the reality changed after Grace was born. Marie's maternal feelings rose strongly, making it impossible for her to easily give up her daughter. According to Marie's friends, she began to be jealous of Tanya. They suspected that Marie did not want to give Grace to Tanya and intended to win James back. These accusations immediately made Tanya the prime suspect. If Marie disappeared, all of Tanya's problems would be solved. She would have the chance to raise Grace alone and continue to be James' beloved wife. It has been 2 months since Marie went missing, but no more clues have been found. Investigators have used many methods, including GPS, to find her. However, in 2011, GPS technology was not yet fully developed, so they had to rely heavily on call and text data from mobile phones. The only thing they know for sure is that Marie was at the airport with James, but not Tanya. Later, Jason, a young priest, came to the police station. He had spoken on behalf of James many times, and one day he decided to speak directly to the investigators. Jason recounted a conversation he had overheard. Shortly after Marie's disappearance, James expressed his sadness and concern. He said that he would have to leave the country because of Marie's disappearance but could not reveal the details. James only mentioned that something terrible had happened during the time when Marie was severely depressed. During that period, James stayed with Marie at the clinic for a few days, while Jason temporarily replaced him. Rumors of Pastor James' illicit relationship spread among the parishioners, and Jason was shocked to learn about James' polygamy. Jason directly asked him about his relationship with Marie. James frankly admitted that he had had sex with both Marie and his wife. James said that he and Marie had argued and fought shortly before she went missing, but he insisted that Marie was still alive when she disappeared. After this conversation, James decided to resign from his pastoral duties and quickly left the city with his family, including Tanya and Grace, to move to Arizona. Recently, Marie's family contacted the Flanders family to retrieve some of her belongings. As a result, investigators seized Marie's phone, which may have contained important information. Although most of the data had been deleted, some of it was recovered. They also found a video of James advertising precious metals on the phone, which aroused the investigators' suspicions. In 2011, committing a crime was easier than it is today. Surveillance cameras were not common, and digital traces could quickly disappear. DNA detection technology was just beginning to develop, making it easier for criminals to get away with their crimes. However, thanks to the development of digital forensics, this case may be solved. 3 years after Marie's disappearance, new software was developed that could recover data from phones and computers. Thanks to this, it was possible to recover messages between Marie and James. These messages showed a completely different side of James. The couple exchanged sensitive pictures, even taken in church. In a final email to James, Marie expressed her desire to leave Fort Walton Beach and not leave her child in what she called a cursed place. The secrets that the Flanders family had kept for so long were exposed. In desperation, James and his lawyer decided to take their last chance. They proposed a deal. If James revealed the location of the victim's body, he would only be charged with manslaughter, which carries a lighter sentence. Marie's family, after years of pain and suffering, agreed to the deal. They just wanted to know the truth and find peace of mind. James shares details about his relationship with Marie and the hardships they went through. Marie suffered from depression, which caused many arguments between them. During one argument, Marie pushed James, and when he tried to calm her down, she accidentally fell to the ground and lost consciousness. This was a fateful moment in their lives. James realized the seriousness of the situation when Marie's heart stopped beating. Although he tried to save her, Marie eventually passed away. This incident left James with deep remorse and regret. After years of fruitless searching, investigators finally found Marie's body in James Flanders' yard. The body was wrapped in a blanket and buried 5 feet underground, only discovered when James showed them the exact location. The discovery shocked everyone involved in the case. James Flanders was sentenced to 15 years in prison for manslaughter, with the possibility of parole after 11 years. His wife, Tanya, was apparently unaware of her husband's crimes and was in complete shock at Marie's death. This was confirmed by a witness, who was later revealed to be the Flanders family's lawyer. Had Marie's body been discovered earlier, experts could have determined the cause of death, which could have affected the investigation. After 5 years, Marie was finally laid to rest at her funeral. It is possible that her sister Esther sang a farewell song for her. However, the fate of little Grace remains a mystery. Currently, Grace lives with her foster mother, Tanya Flanders, in Arizona. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Blommel family. Roger Blommel was born on January 17, 1965, into a lively family with his parents and 7 siblings, 6 brothers and 1 sister. The family was not only large but also close-knit, instilling strong values and a sense of community. Even in high school, Roger was a diligent young man with future ambitions. He started driving his father's truck and, after finishing high school, worked in concrete transportation. Eventually, he realized his true passion was in sales, where he achieved success. His friends often said that he could sell ice to an Eskimo, which showed his amazing sales skills. This talent came with a generous, cheerful, and outgoing personality. He always seemed happy, and nothing pleased him more than making everyone around him smile. Roger had a good life and an excellent relationship with his family. The only thing missing was a partner, and one day he found that too. Although he did not elaborate, a close friend recounted that one evening, when he met a young woman who captivated him, Roger declared with complete determination that she was the woman he was going to marry. Melissa was born in Wichita on January 1, 1960. She grew up in a loving family with 3 girls and 3 boys, though sadly, a younger sister passed away before her first birthday. Melissa was a kind and diligent person, always willing to assist her family and others. She started her career as an accountant at a bank and built a successful path over the years. Her dedication, commitment, and teamwork earned her numerous promotions, eventually becoming vice president of the bank. In 1991, she met her soulmate, and they got married. Life appeared perfect for the Blumel family. Melissa advances in her banking career, while Roger uses his confidence to start his own business. Roger enjoyed spending time with friends and spreading happiness. He found an ideal partner in Melissa. Both shared a strong sense of social responsibility, actively participating in charity, sports, and community events. Although, as we've seen in almost every story, a perfect life doesn't exist, for the Blumel family, the only thing missing was a child to fill their loving home with laughter and joy. Unfortunately, this wish remained out of reach for the couple, and after years of unsuccessful attempts to conceive, Roger and Melissa began considering the idea of adopting a child. To fulfill their goal, they reached out to a local social worker and found out that a woman named Kisha Shaberg had put her 2 sons up for adoption. Her sons are Anthony, a 7-year-old whom everyone calls Tony, and Christopher, a 4-year-old known as Chris. Kisha wanted an open adoption, allowing her to keep in touch with her sons and the adoptive family. However, the Blumel family preferred to adopt the children without maintaining those connections, aiming to provide a fresh start for them away from their difficult past. Roger and Melissa's plan finally worked, and from that moment on, Anthony and Christopher officially became part of the Blumel family, starting to enjoy a life they never imagined. Emotional, Anthony was surprised to be able to have dinner every day. The kids adapted quickly and began to enjoy their new life. They attended elementary school and successfully completed that stage as good students. In high school, they also did well, had no issues with their peers, integrated completely, and formed a large group of friends. Plus, they excelled in sports, especially wrestling and football. Anthony quickly advanced in wrestling, earning 2nd place in a competition in his division. At that time, everything seemed to promise a bright future for the boys and a happy life for the whole family. However, the Blumel family began to fall apart when Anthony was in his senior year of high school. The young man, who had previously behaved admirably, started to change. He became someone who frequently argued with his parents, claiming they always favored his younger brother, Christopher. He began drinking alcohol, ignored curfews, and even smoked marijuana. Life in the Blumel household descended into chaos, and it soon appeared that any hope of the young man getting back on track was lost. For a long time, Anthony dreamed of joining the United States Air Force after high school, but his own actions ended that possibility. In 2013, he was arrested for an unspecified violent act and later, after graduation, for driving under the influence of alcohol. With these incidents on his record, a future in military aviation was no longer possible. Rather than reflecting on his situation, Anthony spiraled further downward. After graduating, his life lacked direction. He didn't want to study or work, all he wanted was to sleep late and spend his days in a haze of cannabis smoke. Melissa was terrified of the boy's angry outbursts, causing her to endure extremely difficult pressure. Adding to the complexity, there was something the Blumel family was unaware of. Since the spring of 2013, Kisha has been in contact with her biological sons through social media. It appeared that Christopher either ignored Kisha's friend request or showed little interest in communicating with his biological mother. In contrast, Anthony promptly accepted the connection and was thrilled to reunite with his real mother. Kisha was heartbroken after giving her sons to the Blummel family, but she found comfort in knowing they were both welcomed into a good home and would stay together. Despite this, she struggled with the lack of contact. Reconnecting with her eldest son filled her with joy, though she also felt deep resentment towards the Blummel family, believing they had turned Christopher against her. However, this resentment was overshadowed by the happiness of reuniting with her firstborn. Moreover, when she heard about Anthony's issues with his adoptive parents, Kisha became hopeful about reuniting with him and quickly invited him to visit her. Meanwhile, at the adoptive family's house, instead of getting better, things were getting worse. The conflict reached a boiling point when one day, during one of his tantrums, Anthony punched a hole in the wall. This was a turning point for the Blummel family. They could no longer risk their own safety or Christopher. After several unsuccessful attempts to stop the eldest son's behavior, Roger and Melissa made the tough decision to tell Anthony he had to leave the house. The young man initially wandered without purpose but soon realized he needed to support himself. He found some jobs at fast food restaurants and supplemented his small income by selling cannabis. Although he slept like a nomad, staying at various friends' houses, he fell in with a group of youths heavily involved in drug abuse. In the midst of these challenging circumstances, a glimmer of hope appeared when Kisha invited him to come live with her in California. Anthony eagerly accepted, and they reunited at Kisha's home in September 2013. He was accompanied by his best friend from high school, Braden, who had dropped out in his junior year to dedicate himself to drug dealing. The two young men were excited because they hoped to get Kisha's support to start a large marijuana business in the area, as she was experienced in the drug trade. They even considered entering the medical cannabis market. In reality, the two young men ended up living in a small one-room apartment. It's easy to see how tensions arose, especially since Sean, Kisha's partner, worked 2 jobs and was the only one providing for 5 people. Kisha contributed only a portion of the social assistance she received for her daughter. Meanwhile, Kisha, Anthony, and Braden spent their days using drugs, and Kisha's younger daughter was constantly exposed to this negative environment. At one point, things became unacceptable when Sean discovered that Anthony and Braden were selling marijuana near their house. He informed them that their actions were unacceptable and dangerous for his as the property owner, and insisted they take their drugs elsewhere. Following this incident, Sean issued an ultimatum to all the house occupants: everyone must find a job or leave the apartment. Instead of urging people to change as he intended, his actions led them to form an alliance and express their indignation towards his. They decided to leave the apartment and stay at a nearby hotel for 2 weeks. However, this was not a viable solution because after those weeks, they lacked the income to continue paying for the hotel. Their need for money didn't lead them to consider honest work. Their first thought was to return to Kansas, likely because Anthony knew the drug trade there well. After nearly a day of traveling, the group chose to stop in Arizona and rest overnight at a hotel. During their stay, Anthony shared a disturbing idea with his companions. He planned to kill his adoptive parents to claim their inheritance. When they arrived in Wichita, they booked a hotel room for a month and focused on planning the details of the affair. The plan was straightforward. They needed to eliminate Roger and Melissa, collect the insurance money, sell their assets, and use the proceeds to start a larger-scale drug operation. Anthony believed that the family he had returned to could become wealthy by growing and selling marijuana. He even suggested the ideal day for the crime: Friday, November 15, 2013, when his brother Christopher would be away at a wrestling event. Anthony, a former star wrestler, had stayed connected with some team members and found out about Christopher's commitment that night. Anthony gradually developed a plan to invite Roger and Melissa out under the pretense of discussing and resolving previous issues. Meanwhile, Braden would take Kisha to their home while it was empty so she could steal valuables. Anthony knows where his foster parents keep money for emergencies. The plan was to make it look like a robbery gone wrong, but from the start, the true intention was for Kisha to end Roger and Melissa's lives when they returned. Everyone initially supported the plan, but later, Braden decided to withdraw. Although he didn't want to be directly involved, he agreed to help by obtaining the necessary guns. Instead, he suggested his friend Andrew, a former high school classmate, to serve as the driver for Kisha to reach the Blumel residence. Braden fulfilled his promise by acquiring 2 pistols from other criminals. It's important to note that there was never any plan to share the money with Andrew. He was promised $11,000 to act mainly as a driver and assist Kisha in the robbery. Ultimately, Kisha was to be in charge. In early November, Kisha shared a photo of herself with Anthony on social media, captioned, "A bond that cannot be broken." Finally, the anticipated day came, Friday, November 15, 2013. As Anthony had expected, his wonderful adoptive parents agreed to meet him without hesitation. The meeting went smoothly. Meanwhile, at the Blumel residence, a different scene unfolded. As soon as Roger and Melissa left for the meeting, Kisha and Andrew broke into the house by forcing open the garage door. They began searching through the house, seizing small valuable items and cash that the couple had kept for emergencies. After completing the first phase of their plan, Kisha and Andrew hid near the secluded house, waiting for Roger and Melissa to return. Shortly after, they received a call from Anthony. Anthony told them that the meeting was over and that his foster parents had left him at a hotel before going home. They didn't have to wait long. When the Blumel vehicle halted in front of the parking gate, 2 attackers emerged from hiding. Kisha quickly positioned herself next to Melissa, while Andrew targeted Roger to keep him still. Melissa, shocked, recognized Kisha as the mother of the children they had adopted over a decade ago to give them love, stability, and a better future. She could only exclaim, "Oh my God, Kisha," before a precise shot to her head caused her to collapse in her seat. Roger, utterly shocked, attempted to help his wife. At that moment, Kisha approached the window and aimed at Roger's head. She pulled the trigger, but the gun jammed. She tried repeatedly to fire while Roger stood frozen beside his wife's lifeless body. Eventually, the gun went off, and Roger fell beside the woman who had been his life's greatest partner. After completing their deadly plan, Kisha and Andrew got into their vehicle and swiftly drove away. The Blumel couple remained there until about 9:15 p.m. when Christopher returned from a meeting and discovered the horrific scene. He quickly called 911, saying he had just come home and found his parents nearly unconscious in their van. He explained that Roger was coughing and Melissa was nodding her head. Both had gunshot wounds to their heads. The dispatcher told him to perform resuscitation attempts while emergency services arrived a few minutes later to take over. Remarkably, the Blumels were still alive, but in critical condition, so they were rushed to a hospital. When they got back to the hotel where they were staying, Kisha seemed to have a panic attack and said she just needed to use an illegal substance, which she did with the other guys. Additionally, around that time, Kisha disposed of the used weapon and a purse containing items she had stolen from the house, so they could be dumped in a nearby stream. Andrew threw the items into a pond in a nearby park. The next day, Anthony used the money he stole from his adoptive parents to start dealing marijuana, earning his first $100. Sadly, that same day, Melissa passed away at the age of 53 after a long battle. Anthony also visited his father in the hospital, unaware that he had been removed from both the Blumel family will and their insurance policies some time earlier. As a result, the 2 terrible crimes were committed for nothing. In the days that followed, it was discovered that Andrew had not been paid and was unaware that Kisha had taken money from the Blummel family's home. Eventually, they were caught. During the first inspections of the Blummel residence, police noticed the garage door had been forced open and the home was in complete disarray with items scattered everywhere. It was confirmed that money, jewelry, and other items were stolen. Authorities initially thought the attack on the couple happened because they arrived while the thieves were still there. However, it was later determined that the fatal assault occurred before the couple entered the home, so this theory was dismissed. In the van where Roger and Melissa were attacked, investigators found no significant fingerprints, but they did discover a casing. The authorities then focused on the victims' workplaces, suspecting a disgruntled client might have sought revenge, but this theory was dismissed. Next, they decided to speak with people close to the couple. Anthony was first on the detectives' list because he was the last person seen with the victims. However, he insisted he knew nothing about the incident and had not been involved. He claimed that after dinner, he returned directly to the hotel where he was staying with his mother. This was confirmed by the hotel staff. Christopher was second on the list of suspects because he had discovered the bodies. However, he was quickly cleared after confirming that he was at a dinner with the wrestling team during the incident. Despite this, investigators noticed something unusual about his behavior. He didn't seem very upset and appeared deep in thought. When the police asked him who he thought might be responsible for what happened to his parents, Christopher promptly mentioned one person. He said the only person who might have a grudge against his parents and possibly commit such an act was his older brother, Anthony. Thanks to this crucial tip, the authorities caught a lucky break in their search for the culprits. A man reached out to the police to say that a young guy, a friend of Anthony, had approached him wanting to buy a gun. The detectives focused their attention on this person, and upon checking his background, they found he had a long history connected to drugs. They also found out that he had traveled to California with Anthony. The guy in question was Braden. Braden soon received a message from his family letting him know that investigators from the sheriff's office wanted to question him about the incident involving the Blummels. The next morning, Braden went to the police station. A press report revealed that on his way there, he stopped by a pond to discard something, reportedly the guns used in the crime that hadn't been disposed of as intended. According to this report, he was already under surveillance, and when the police searched the water, they found a bag he had thrown in, containing a pistol that hadn't been fired during the attack. Braden's interrogation lasted 3 days. Initially, he insisted he was not involved in the incident. However, under pressure from authorities, he eventually confessed everything he knew, explaining that the plan for the attack was Anthony's idea. Anthony Blummel, 18, and his biological mother Kisha, 35, were arrested on November 19 at the hotel where they were staying. In addition, Andrew, who was also 18, was arrested, followed by Braden's arrest on November 20, 2013. At that time, Kisha did not admit to being involved in the robbery and other crimes, even though the 3 young men confessed to what had happened. On November 25, 2013, the accused first appeared in court via video conference. During this appearance, they were all charged with the same offenses: first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated robbery, burglary, and theft. The 3 young men were set a bail of $500,000, and for Kisha, the bail was set at $1 million. On December 21, Rogers passed away at the age of 48, joining his beloved Melissa. After his death, the situation worsened for the woman and the 3 young men, as they faced the risk of being charged with capital murder, which could lead to a death penalty sentence. On January 3, 2014, the 4 detainees were officially charged with capital murder, accused of being responsible for the deaths of multiple people in the same incident. Additionally, Kisha was charged with 2 counts of aggravated robbery, 1 count of burglary, and 1 count of theft. The preliminary hearing was held on July 17th of that year. By that time, Braden had negotiated with the authorities and became the prosecution's star witness in exchange for a reduced sentence. After a year of negotiations, not only did Braden reach an agreement, but two other individuals involved in the crime also negotiated with the prosecution. According to the agreements, the accused would not contest the charges against them and would waive their right to appeal their sentences. In return, the prosecution agreed not to seek the death penalty and to drop some charges. Starting in mid-2015, each of them confirmed their decision to plead guilty in separate hearings. The judge sentenced Kisha to life in prison without parole for the capital murder charge and an additional 122 months for 2 counts of aggravated robbery. These sentences will be served consecutively. When given the chance to speak, she expressed deep regret for what happened and sympathized with the Blummel family. However, the rest of her statement was controversial, as she claimed she was not involved in the incident and harbored no ill will towards the Blummels. Instead, she expressed great respect for them, acknowledging that they had provided Anthony and Christopher with a wonderful life, for which she remained grateful. Official records indicate that Kisha is still held in a high-security correctional facility. The next to face his fate was his son, Anthony Blummel, known to everyone as Tony, who received the same sentence as his mother. During the sentencing hearing, Anthony, who chose not to speak when given a chance, listened to the victim impact statement made by his aunt, Christina Blummel. She thanked the authorities for delivering justice and spoke about all the love that Roger and Melissa had shown the boy. In complete silence, Anthony listened to Christina's heartfelt words, and at one point, tears almost welled up in the young accused's eyes. Ultimately, the woman informed Anthony that he had made his decisions voluntarily. She suggested that he might eventually understand his choices, or perhaps he never will. Since then, Anthony has been in a correctional facility. Up to now, his record includes numerous infractions, such as smuggling, fighting, unauthorized phone use, explicit sexual activity, theft, and disobedience, among others. A week after those trials, it was Andrew's turn, the only one who refused to admit his responsibility. He was found guilty of first and second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison plus 155 months. Finally, Braden, the last person involved in the incident, who had made a plea deal with the prosecution from the start, was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 242 years in prison. According to his official record, Braden will have his first chance to be released on May 28, 2035. However, his prison record shows he hasn't reformed, as he has received 71 disciplinary reports for disobedience, threatening others, using stimulants, drunkenness, possession of contraband tobacco, theft, and dangerous smuggling, among other reasons. Ultimately, the district attorney was satisfied with the case's outcome. Although Kisha had given up that option, she unsuccessfully tried to appeal her sentences. The undeniable fact at the conclusion of this story is that the lives of two wonderful people, Roger and Melissa Blummel, ended in a tragic and needless way. The tragedy began with the bitterness or guilt of a woman who lived a life of excess and gave her children up for adoption. She couldn't handle the fact that one of her descendants no longer wanted contact with her. This seemingly caused her to misdirect her anger towards the people who had lovingly cared for her children. Anthony reacted to the couple's love and care with resentment, envy, and violence. He turned to substance abuse and eventually committed 2 crimes. Kisha's younger daughter was placed in foster care. On the other hand, Christopher Blummel overcame the loss, the pain, and with the support of his family, he lived a positive life. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of John Parker. John Parker was born in 1970. He, along with his older brother, grew up in Indiana, United States. Born into a middle-class family, John was an ambitious young man with a strong desire for independence and self-improvement. Right after graduating from high school, he began looking for ways to make money. His brother recalls that John's first job was as a waiter's assistant in a restaurant, but he left the position quickly for unknown reasons, and he feeling frustrated at work. However, this setback did not dampen his ambitions. Soon after, he found a new job that offered him greater independence and helped him realize his true passion, sales. John's career took off when he became a door-to-door salesman for Kirby vacuum cleaners. At first, his family doubted his decision, but he quickly proved them wrong. By the end of his first year, John had become the top salesperson in the area. He worked diligently, often putting in 12 to 16 hours a day, which earned him recognition at company meetings and the respect of his peers. John's success inspired other salespeople, who came to him for guidance, new ideas, and motivation, and he happily took on a leadership role. During this period, John met Judy, a 20 years old from Texas. She comes from a low-income family. Born in October 1969, Judy was confident and outgoing. Although John wasn't looking to hire new salespeople at the time, Judy's enthusiasm and assertiveness convinced him to give her a chance. Despite being young, but Judy had already experienced significant life events. At 14, with her parents' permission, she had gotten married and later divorced, resulting in 2 children, Christina and Daniel Hicks. John decided to mentor Judy in vacuum cleaner sales. Judy to be a quick learner, and she not only earning a spot on John's sales team but also winning his affection. The two eventually started dating each other. John's life was thriving. He was renowned for his exceptional sales skills and training abilities, and Judy's support in both his personal and professional life. This foundation gave John the confidence to launch his own business in Michigan, specializing in selling and servicing Kirby vacuum cleaners. As part of his venture, John offered training sessions to salespeople, sharing effective strategies he developed and the passion that drove his success. His company rose to become one of the area's top performers, and John consistently credited his success to Judy's unwavering support. In 1992, John and Judy got married, having established stability in their professional lives. In the following years, they dedicate themselves to demonstrating what a good salesperson can achieve in life. The couple had 2 daughters, Tiffany and Erica, in addition to Judy's 2 children from a previous relationship, Christina and Daniel. After that, their family moved residences several times, always to nicer houses, giving their children access to better schools, luxury cars, and regular vacations. Initially, John had no issues with his stepchildren. While Daniel was energetic and sometimes mischievous, Christina was a sweet and well-behaved child. John and Judy enjoyed a comfortable life, and John used his wealth as motivation for young salespeople he trained, proving that hard work and determination can bring about a prosperous life. As Christina and Daniel entered teenage years, problems arose. Christina began associating with people who exhibited poor behavior and allegedly engaged in underage drinking and even drug use. At the same time, Daniel, who was 13, was dealing with anger issues and hanging out with a questionable group of friends. One incident occurred when Daniel took his father John's car and drove recklessly through the neighborhood with his friends, knocking down and damaging several mailbox posts. To avoid trouble with the police, John took responsibility for the damage and personally paid the affected homeowners the next day. Around this time, John received a complaint from his stepson's school regarding the boy's misconduct. Unfortunately, the situation escalated, and John physically struck the young man, causing further strain on their relationship. 9 years after the family began living together, Judy decided to take them on a trip to Texas, where she grew up. During this visit, Judy expressed her concerns to her brother about her troubled marriage and the mistreatment of Christina and Daniel by John. However, Judy blamed John for her children's problems, and she made excuses for their misbehavior, which made their family problems worse. John's life became even more complicated when he began to suspect his wife of having an affair, specifically with one of his employees. To uncover the truth, John took matters into his own hands. He installed cameras in several parts of the office and eventually obtained clear evidence of his wife's infidelity. This discovery was a real shock to John, led completely changing his previously happy and friendly personality. John's behavior deteriorated as he began drinking excessively, leading to intense arguments with Judy and violent outbursts towards his children. When Tiffany's teacher informed John that she hadn't brought her homework, he punished her with a belt, leaving visible marks. The teacher reported the incident to social services the next day, after seeing the injuries. Before social services arrived, John intimidated the children by implying that if they wanted to maintain their comfortable life, they should remain silent about the beating. As a result, Tiffany falsely accused Daniel of being responsible, and he didn't deny it. John's bad mood affected not only his family, but also his employees and the company's clients, who suffered through his fits of anger as a result of his wife's infidelity. In an attempt to create distance between his wife and the person she was involved with, John moved his family to a more affluent area in Crown Point, Indiana. Despite still loving his wife and hoping that a change of environment would give them a fresh start, the situation did not improve. While Judy lost weight and changed her style to improve her appearance, John did the opposite. He let himself go, grew a beard, started smoking, and only wore jeans. His preoccupation with his personal problems left him constantly distracted. As a result, the business began to suffer, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. John was forced to sell his boat to stay financially afloat. Rumors spread throughout the office that Judy was having an affair with Jeff, John's closest business associate. Although the validity of these rumors was uncertain, but they put more strain on John and Judy's already troubled marriage. John's world was turned upside down when Judy told him she wanted a divorce. However, John made it clear that if she left him, she would be left with nothing. He felt he had given her everything, including lifting her out of poverty, accepting her children, providing her with luxuries, and loving her. However, he became exasperated when she decides to leave, threatening that if she leaves him, she will leave with empty hands. John possessed a crucial piece of evidence, a recording of Judy having an affair with Jeff. As a result, their relationship became more strained in early 2003, which also affected their children's behavior. On Thursday, April 17, 2013, John and Judy attempted to resolve their issues over dinner at a restaurant. After finishing dinner, they called home to check on the children and said they would be back soon. However, their plans changed when Christina asked them to stop by the office because she had left a school notebook there. Leaving the restaurant, they went to the company and John brought the rest of the dinner to Jeff, who was working late. When they arrived at the office in an isolated industrial area around 10 p.m., John went inside to talk to Jeff while Judy quickly retrieved the notebook and returned to their car. Minutes after, John left the office. He opened the rear door on the driver's side of his vehicle to retrieve something. Suddenly, 2 loud gunshots rang out, and John fell to the ground in the parking lot. Judy and Jeff immediately called 911 to report the incident. Police and medical units arrived at the scene quickly. Sadly, 33 years old John Parker was found to have been shot in the back of the head and was pronounced dead at the scene. During the investigation, Judy, who was inside the vehicle when the shots were fired, was questioned by the authorities. She told them she was sitting in the car when her husband, John, came out of the office and opened the rear door on the driver's side. Her account was limited, as she did not see what happened next, only hearing the 2 loud gunshots after John opened the door. Judy remembered that when she heard the shots, she immediately hid behind the seat. When she cautiously lifted her head, she caught a brief glimpse of a man wearing dark clothing fleeing the scene. They also noticed that John's wallet was missing, leading them to initially believe it was a robbery. As investigators took a closer look, they started to question the details surrounding John's death. Since no one knew about Judy and John's plans, several inconsistencies stood out. What could be the motive for targeting an empty industrial area at night when there would be no one around? If the goal was robbery, it doesn't make sense that the perpetrator would kill John before taking his belongings, especially when he was wearing a $20,000 gold Rolex and other easily accessible valuables. Moreover, why didn't the thief search John's pockets? This is a common action in robberies. The investigation into John's death raised more questions than it answered. 2 bullet casings found at the scene matched Judy's claim of hearing 2 shots. It was clear that one of the shots had killed John instantly, but there was no official information about the second shot. The investigators started by taking a statement from Judy, the key witness to the incident. Judy reported that her husband had previously gotten into an argument with one of his employees. She was able to identify the employee involved in the argument, but beyond this, she had no additional information to provide beyond what she had already shared at the scene. The investigators also spoke with Jeff, who was inside the office at the time of the shooting. However, he was unable to provide any useful information, as he did not exit the office until after the shots had been fired and the incident was over. The authorities informed Christina that her stepfather had passed away. After nearly ruling out a robbery motive, detectives shifted their investigation to focus on the people close to John, starting with an employee who had previously expressed resentment towards him. The employee confirmed that they had a significant disagreement, but claimed that it had been peacefully resolved. He also provided an alibi, which was thoroughly investigated and verified. The investigation was expanded to cover almost all individuals associated with John, including those he did business with. Past and present employees, competitors in his industry, and his personal friends and social connections. The investigation into John's murder revealed a new lead involving Judy. Unlike what is typically expected of a grieving person, her behavior during her husband's funeral was unusual, as she seemed cheerful and was chatting with friends. Another notable observation was that her ex-husband seemed completely unbothered by the incident, calmly reading a newspaper just 4 days after John's murder. Daniel, 15, was brought in for questioning on suspicion of being involved in the murder. The police suspected him because of an incident 6 months earlier. At that time, gang members told the police that Daniel had paid them to kill his stepfather, John. However, the gang members claimed they never planned to carry out the murder and just kept the money. The police didn't find their story believable and took the money, but they didn't seem to do anything more about it at the time. Later, after John was killed, the police decided to re-examine whether Daniel might be involved in the crime. During questioning, Daniel admitted to paying people to hurt John, but not intending to kill him, but rather injure him, specifically by breaking his legs. Authorities did detain one of the individuals Daniel to have hired, but this person was released after a thorough investigation verified their alibi. Daniel was eventually released after 9 days due to insufficient evidence and because he was a minor. As the case unfolded, it became clear that John had prior conflicts with the children of Judy, Christina, and Daniel. This led to further scrutiny of Daniel and raised suspicions about Judy's 17-year-old daughter, Christina. Christina denied any involvement when questioned by investigators. Both Christina and Daniel expressed a desire to eliminate John, leading investigators to wonder where the money for these schemes came from, and they suspected that Judy might be the one giving them the money to carry out these plans. When investigators looked more closely, they discovered that before John's death, he and Judy's relationship had deteriorated partly due to Judy's infidelity. Despite this, it appeared John had no intention of leaving Judy and was instead working on saving their troubled marriage. Judy's main reason for targeting her husband appeared to be financial gain. Detectives found that John had 2 life insurance policies worth $1 million. Following John's death, Judy tried to collect the insurance money, but the insurance company initially denied her claim due to the ongoing investigation into his death. The payment was also postponed because John's father suspected Judy was involved in his son's death and was investigating further. The case eventually stalled due to lack of concrete evidence, but a lot has changed in John's family. Judy was rarely at home, she devoting her time to her new partner, Jeff, who was also John's manager. As a result, Christina and Daniel took on more responsibilities, caring for their younger sisters, Tiffany and Erica. After several months, Judy and Jeff decided to relocate out of state with John's younger daughters, Tiffany and Erica. Around this time, Daniel went to live with his biological father, while Christina remained in the house, now pregnant and in a relationship with her boyfriend. The investigation was stalled, but the authorities didn't give up. They kept the case open and repeatedly reviewed the files, hoping to find a clue new. This persistence eventually paid off. The detectives received a new lead, which led them to question some of the classmates of Christina and Daniel. The classmates confessed to selling a gun to Christina and Daniel, which sparked an investigation into a family John-owned piece of land that Christina used for target practice. When investigators searched the area, they found multiple spent bullet casings. Laboratory analysis of these casings revealed a crucial piece of evidence. The casings matched those found at John's 2007 crime scene. New information came to light when a narcotics officer revealed that Christina's ex-boyfriend had been involved in a drug-related case. With the hope of receiving a lighter sentence, Christina's ex-boyfriend revealed a conversation he had with Judy. In the conversation, Judy mentioned that her son Daniel was the one who fired the fatal shot. When confronted with this new evidence, Christina began to cooperate. As the owner of the gun used in the crime, the 21-year-old Christina admitted to buying the weapon. She also admitted that on the night of the incident, she had asked her parents to visit the office, claiming she had left her homework behind there. Christina admitted to being involved in plot to kill John and stated that her younger brother Daniel was designated as the person who would open fire. When Daniel was found and arrested in Arizona, he was confronted with the new evidence and Christina's confession. Daniel confessed to shooting John, but claimed that their mother, Judy, was the one who had come up with the plan. According to Daniel, Judy had stolen $7,500 by forging company checks and had used this money to try to hire someone to kill John, but ultimately decided to have Daniel do it instead. Judy's original plan failed when the individuals she hired took the payment but did not complete the task. At that point, Judy instructed them to buy a gun for her son to use instead. Furthermore, Daniel revealed that it was Judy who created the excuse for her and John to leave the house that night. When Christina called to pick up her homework that she had left at company, he shot John in the head. The second shot occurred accidentally as Daniel rummaged through John's pockets, searching for his wallet as his mother had instructed. Following the shooting, Daniel returned home without alerting his younger sisters. His sister Christina helped by distracting Tiffany and Erica with television, allowing Daniel to enter the house unnoticed. Christina and Daniel claimed that their mother manipulated them into committing the crime by telling them they had been abused by John and promising that by doing so, they would gain a better life with more freedom and financial stability. However, this was not Judy's first attempt to harm her husband, as she had previously tried to poison his food, which led to he being briefly hospitalized. By the end of 2007, Christina and Daniel were formally charged with murder and conspiracy. However, Christina entered a not guilty plea for the conspiracy charge and was released on bail a few months later. In 2008, when Daniel was 20 years old, he pleaded guilty to conspiring to kill his stepfather, John. As part of a deal, Daniel agreed to cooperate and testify against his mother in exchange for a lighter sentence. Instead of being charged with murder, he would face a sentence of 20 to 25 years in prison for conspiracy. According to Daniel, The plan to kill John began nearly a year before the incident, when he was just 14 years old. Judy and Christina initially brought the idea to him. He claimed, and Judy supplied him with a gun and other necessary items for the crime. These items included money to buy black clothing, gloves, and a mask. His mother also instructed him on how to commit the crime without leaving any evidence behind, including taking a thorough shower to eliminate gunpowder residue after returning home. Then Judy took charge of getting rid of the evidence, including the gun, clothes, and her husband's wallet. 6 years later, in July 2009, Judy knew she couldn't escape the law anymore and turned herself in. She agreed to plead guilty to conspiracy to commit murder, admitting she had planned, carried out, and tried to cover up the crime. The prosecutors wanted Judy to spend the rest of her life in prison, with a minimum sentence of 28 years and a maximum sentence of 35 years. Judy, who was nearly 40 years old at the time, was given a 33-year prison sentence in August 2009. The next month, her co-conspirator Daniel received a 23-year sentence. Christina was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Press reports said Daniel was released in 2017 after participating in a community transition court program and that he subsequently chose to live a low-profile life. Christina served 4 years of her sentence and was released in 2013, but sadly died from a drug overdose shortly after. This case is a tragic example of how greed can lead people to commit terrible crimes. Judy's actions had devastating consequences for her family. Despite overcoming early struggles and achieving success, her desire for more led her to destroy the life of a successful businessman, John Parker. Her actions also deeply affected her 4 children, leaving 2 in prison and taking away their father. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sion Kingi. Sion Kingi was born in New Zealand on December 16, 1974. When she was 7, her family moved to New Zealand, a small coastal town in Australia with a population of about 5,000. The area is known for its warm, pleasant climate. From a young age, Sion was a kind and gentle person who loved sports, particularly ballet and netball. Although she was naturally modest, she had a charming personality that made her popular among her peers. Sion was tall, had long blonde hair and striking eyes, which helped her stand out in school. Unfortunately, her beautiful appearance eventually led to serious consequences in her life. Friday, November 27, 1987, was an ordinary day. It was a beautiful sunny day. Typically, this time of year features perfect weather, warm sun and a cool breeze, so many locals were enjoying the beach. Sion's mother, Linda, went to the store to buy food and fabric to sew a lovely outfit for her daughter's upcoming birthday. After school, Sion got on her yellow bike, she knowing she was going to the store to help her mother Linda choose fabric. Linda wanted to select something Sion would love, so she headed to the store right after classes ended. Once they chose the fabric for the dress, they were only free in the afternoon. After making their purchases, Linda planned to stop by the bakery to buy some treats for dinner. Sion was already feeling tired and wanted to head home. She asked her mother if she could go home by herself first. Her mother agreed, and Sion rode her bike along her favorite shortcut. While she had taken this route many times before, it didn't feel as safe today. In the 1980s, New Zealand was a peaceful small town where everyone knew each other, making it one of the safest places in the area. The Kingi family's home was only a few kilometers from the local store, they easily reachable by bike in just a few minutes. Linda felt secure allowing her 12-year-old daughter, Sion, to ride there alone, as nothing bad had ever happened in their quiet town. In fact, her mother would follow her right after buying a few things. At 4:45 p.m., Sion rode her bike toward home, taking a path that went through the park, while Linda drove a different route in her car. Since Sion wasn't biking too quickly, she and her mother were only a few minutes apart. Linda anticipated arriving home just after Sion. However, when returned, Linda found no one at home, Sion was not there, and her yellow bicycle was missing. Initially, Linda wasn't worried about Sion's absence. The girl might have met a friend or stopped by to visit someone, especially with the weekend approaching after a long school week. Teenagers often hang out after classes, and Sion had many friends, so it was normal for her to drop in on someone. Sion had just picked out a beautiful fabric with her mother, Linda, and she could have wanted to share her weekend plans with a friend, as they were also planning to meet up. However, Linda soon began to feel anxious. Sion was well-behaved and never stayed out long without permission. Then, Linda decided to call several of Sion's friends to check if she was with them. To her dismay, no one had seen Sion. By 8 p.m., Sion still hadn't returned home. Although they lived in a small, quiet town with little traffic, Sion always respected the curfew and never wandered outside after dark. On Friday evenings, people often relax and take walks after work. As darkness falls, even the safest towns can become risky. Linda recognized this, so she chose to walk the route that Sion typically took on her bike. This path was the quickest way from their home on the outskirts to the shops in the city. Linda and her husband walked together, and about halfway there, they discovered Sion's yellow bicycle abandoned, but they did not see the girl. The abandoned bike raised concerns, especially since it was Sion's first bike, one she had cherished and would never willingly leave behind. Unfortunately, they couldn't find Sion nearby. Her parents called for her, but there was no answer. They decided to head to the police station. Before leaving, they checked their house to see if Sion had returned and bring a picture of her. With the photo in hand, they went to meet the police. The officers took their report about Sion's disappearance and officially declared her missing. The community was tight-knit, and the city had an extremely low crime rate, so everyone believed Sion would be found quickly. This situation seems to stem from a simple misunderstanding. Sion might have been hanging out with friends or got lost while walking in the forest. However, one officer recalled that there had been a kidnapping in the area shortly before this incident. To address the situation, the police reached out to local media, as they did not have access to social networks or the internet at the time. The following morning, a report about Sion's disappearance was broadcasted, in hopes of finding witnesses who might have seen her the night before. Several people came to the police station with information, but they all insisted they hadn't noticed anything suspicious. These witnesses had seen Linda and Sion while they were picking out fabric for a dress, but none of them saw Sion on their way home, and no one was on the path at that time. The witnesses provided varying details and tried to highlight any unusual occurrences, such as strange cars or odd behavior from local residents. However, they saw that was watching Linda and Sion. A witness reported seeing a dirty white station wagon on the evening of the incident. When police were notified, they discovered the car contained a dark-haired man and a heavy-set woman. They seemed to be aimlessly driving around, possibly searching for someone. It's conceivable that Sion might have come into contact with them. Witnesses noticed this suspicious couple shortly before Sion went missing. The police working on the case noted there were approximately 170,000 station wagons in the area, with about 10,000 of them being white. As a result, the search area has been much wider. Investigators needed to examine all the cars in the region and pursue additional leads. Many police officers and hundreds of volunteers joined the search. Friends, family, neighbors, and members of the community came together to assist in the search for Sion. Ground and air search teams were organized, and photographs of the location where Sion went missing were taken and shared with the media. This method is often used to help potential witnesses recall details about what happened that day. No one was able to provide useful information to the police at first. However, by Sunday, several new witnesses came forward and aided the investigation. The first witness was sunbathing by a stream in the forest when she was attacked by an unknown man. He harassed her and attempted to drag her into his car, which was identified as a white Kingwood station wagon. A second witness saw the incident and assisted the girl in fending off her attacker. Afterward, this witness followed the suspicious vehicle when the driver tried to flee the scene, but he eventually lost sight of them. He managed to give a detailed description of the car and provided the police with its license plate number, 429. The detectives decided to check the phone number associated with the car with that plate number. They found that this number was registered in the area. It belonged to a woman named Valmay Beck. The detectives quickly located her address and visited her home. A man answered the door and confirmed he knew Valmay. He explained that he was not her relative, but her stepson. He also added that her husband was Barry, and they had been married for a year. The description of Barry's closely matched the composite sketch created from the witness's account of the attack near the stream. The suspect's name was Barry Watts. However, the police lacked sufficient evidence to arrest him or accuse him of kidnapping Sion. Despite this, both Barry and Valmay were viewed as potential suspects in the case. Unfortunately, the man didn't know Barry and Valmay's whereabouts. They frequently moved and rented different places, which seemed suspicious. 3 days after Sion disappeared, another witness came forward with information. This witness also reported seeing a white Holden Kingwood near the creek and described the driver as athletic, mentioning a plump woman who was acting suspiciously. After conducting a background check on Barry and Valmay, the police discovered that both had recently been released from prison in Perth, Western Australia, right before Sion went missing. Both Barry and Valmay had extensive criminal records. Just weeks prior, they relocated to Queensland from Perth, pausing their criminal activities after serving their parole. They arrived in a sedan but quickly switched to a white station wagon, which had been linked to several suspicious incidents. The police recognized that they were dealing with dangerous individuals with a long history of armed robberies, break-ins, and forgery related to obtaining fraudulent documents. This was just a portion of Barry and Valmay's criminal history. This news was alarming for the Sion family. If their daughter, Sion, became involved with these individuals, her chances of being found alive and safe were slim. At the time, Barry was 33 years old, and Valmay was 43. Valmay had 6 children from previous relationships. Both police and Sion's family viewed Barry and Valmay as particularly dangerous criminal wanted. The authorities urgently needed to locate them to investigate their connection to Sion's disappearance. 6 days after Sion went missing, a man named Tim visited the police station to report bad news. He reported that the night before, as he was heading to work, he noticed a terrible, foul smell that initially made him think an animal had died nearby. On his way back, he felt compelled to check the area again and was hit by a strong smell of decay. At the side of the road near the stream, he discovered the body of a teenage girl. She was wearing a school uniform and had blonde hair. The police quickly arrived at the location provided by Tim and discovered the mutilated body of a schoolgirl. It was evident that she had been sexually assaulted. The autopsy revealed that she had been strangled, and her body had 12 stab wounds, 3 near her heart and 2 cuts on her throat. Additionally, her spine was broken, and her arms were so badly damaged they were nearly severed from her body. The level of violence indicated that her death was extremely painful. The police suspected that this victim was the missing girl, Sion. She was wearing the same clothes as described by Sion's mother. In the laboratory, a forensic expert confirmed that the victim was 12 years old Sion Kingi. 5 days after this gruesome discovery, family Sion's and friends came together to say their final goodbyes at her funeral. During the ceremony, a classmate read a passage from Peter Pan, suggesting that the girl would always be remembered. Flowers were placed along the route where the young girl had been found. Following media coverage of the incident, a nurse named Nicole Close contacted the police. She reported having seen some suspicious individuals in the area, they driving a white station wagon. One evening, after finishing her shift at the hospital, Nicole was walking through the parking lot to her car when she noticed a white car entering the lot and slowly approaching her. Sensing something was off, she quickly ran to her car, jumped inside, and locked the door. The station wagon did not back away but parked next to her passenger door. A man then got out and approached her window, asking for help with directions. Although he seemed calm and friendly, but she felt uneasy and wanted to end the conversation quickly. She noticed a suspicious-looking woman in the station wagon and thought she saw ropes in the back, which heightened her anxiety. The man continued to speak politely and stepping closer. Despite Nicole explaining the directions multiple times, he kept asking the same question and moved closer to her. Just as he was only a few steps away, Nicole spotted another man walking through the parking lot. The driver noticed him too, which distracted him and gave Nicole the chance to escape. She quickly backed into her car, locked the door, and drove away. Nicole recalled that this incident occurred on November 2nd, before Sion went missing. Investigators viewed the reports about the white car as significant and pursued this lead. Detectives showed Nicole a lineup of photographs featuring unfamiliar faces, and she clearly identified Barry and Valmay. But the testimonies didn't end there. The day after Nicole spoke to the police, another eyewitness came forward with information about a different attempted kidnapping. He reported seeing a man attack a woman on the street, holding a knife to her throat and trying to drag her into a white station wagon. The victim fought back, injuring the attacker's hand with his own knife, and managed to escape. Police then discovered fingerprints belonging to Barry on the woman's car. She also identified Barry and Valmay as likely involved in kidnappings, rapes, and murders in the area. The officers recognized that they were dealing with particularly dangerous criminals who posed a threat to the entire community. They issued descriptions of the suspects, Barry and Valmay, and their white car, making the information public through the media. Although it seemed the criminals were in hiding, but arrest warrants have been sent to police departments nationwide, indicating the possibility that they will be caught soon. In a small town, a local power grid worker was installing wiring when he spotted a car that matched the description of Barry and Valmay's station wagon. He remembered it because of a media alert he had seen a few days earlier. After coming down from his work, he was convinced that this was the car the police were looking for. He quickly went to the police station to mark the location on a map where he had seen the vehicle. When the patrol officers arrived, Barry and Valmay had already fled. Although the police tried to chase them, they lost track of Barry and Valmay once again. Later, the department received a tip about a money transfer made by Barry and Valmay as they were leaving New South Wales. The station wagon was tracked to a motel parking lot, and fortunately, it was still there when the police arrived. The hotel staff allowed the officers to access Barry and Valmay's room. Understanding that they were dealing with potentially armed and dangerous criminals, the officers prepared their weapons. To their surprise, Barry and Valmay did not put up a fight and were arrested in the motel room. The police discovered wigs, hair dye, and a hair clipper, suggesting that they was attempting to change their appearance to evade capture. The suspects, Barry and Valmay, were interrogated for about 12 hours, during which they remained completely silent. Barry did not cooperate at all. He informed the police that he had conspired with his wife, Valmay, to ensure she maintained the same story and did not reveal any important information. In contrast, Valmay quickly gave in. She thought that by doing so, she could reduce her sentence. What she revealed to the authorities was chilling. On November 27th, Valmay claimed that she and Barry were driving around the city in search of a new victim. Barry had an obsession with violence against women, particularly targeting those who were much younger than him. His wife, Valmay, being 10 years older, did not fit his preferences. To fulfill his disturbing desires, Barry started to rape and murder girls who fit his idea of youth and beauty. Valmay claimed she went along with his actions because she was afraid of losing him. On the morning of Sion's disappearance, they spent several hours driving around, believing that finding a girl would be easy. However, most of the girls were with others, making it difficult to kidnap someone discreetly. Barry attempted to approach a number of girls himself, but they managed to evade him. Eventually, he realized that he was not as trustworthy as his wife, so he decided to use Valmay as bait to attract the girls. They parked near a local park and got out of the car. While walking along the trail, they noticed a girl on a yellow bicycle. Barry selected her as his target, and Valmay pretended to be in distress, asking the girl for help because she was having trouble with her dog. Sion, a kind-hearted girl, came Valmay and engaging in conversation. At that moment, Barry attacked Sion from behind, muffling her screams and dragging her into his dirty car. Inside, he restrained her with tape. Valmay sat in the back seat with Sion, while Barry drove away. They traveled 12 kilometers from where the abduction occurred and stopped in a forest. There, Barry laid out a blanket and started raping Sion for several hours, fulfilling his twisted desires. Valmay later reported that Sion showed incredible courage throughout the process of being raped by Barry, she enduring the abuse without crying. She complied with Barry's demands, hoping her obedience would somehow spare her life and that they might let her go. However, from the start, Barry never planned to let her live. His intent was to satisfy his twisted fantasies. Barry started to strangle the Sion and stabbed her with a knife, causing fatal injuries. Throughout this horrific scene, Valmay watched without intervening. She later reported that the belt used for strangling Sion, along with the knife and other items, were discarded nearby in a stream. The police went to the specified location, and Valmay provided them with details about the crime scene. They were able to recover evidence, including light-colored hair that seemed to belong to Sion. Valmay's confession took up 28 pages, describing the terrible ordeal the young victim Sion endured before her death. Although Barry remained unyielding during the interrogation, he became enraged upon learning of his wife's confession, Valmay. To ensure Barry was convicted, investigators attempted to extract a confession from him. However, they were unable to do so. As a result, they decided to use a complex strategy. They planned to place an undercover agent in the temporary detention cell where Barry was held. This spy will spend time with Barry as a fellow prisoner, aiming to establish a friendly relationship with him, which will hopefully lead to receiving a confession from him. A special spy was chosen for this dangerous mission because he was able to withstand the psychological pressure that the mission would cause. He was supposed to listen to Barry confess about the brutal treatment of Sion. But ultimately, this mission did not result in a confession. Meanwhile, Barry remained agitated and was desperately trying to escape punishment. During one meeting with his wife, Valmay, he subtly suggested that she should end her life before the trial to avoid testifying against him. He implied that if she chose not to, she would face serious consequences according to state law. Barry communicated with his wife very cautiously, carefully choosing his words to prevent the authorities from using their phone conversations against him. Fortunately, Valmay did not listen to Barry, which ultimately saved her life. When Barry and Valmay arrived at court, around 200 people were present, ready to confront the brutal murderers. During the trial, Valmay testified against her husband, Barry, portraying him as a true monster. She tried to defend herself by claiming she was coerced into the horrific acts. However, there was strong evidence suggesting she participated willingly. On October 20th, 1988, the jury began deliberating on the verdict. After 3 hours, the jurors found the defendants Barry and Valmay guilty. Valmay Beck received a sentence of 10 years for kidnapping and life in prison for murder. However, due to her cooperation with the prosecution, she was granted the possibility of temporary release. The jury spent 6 hours discussing Barry's sentence. Finally, Barry Watts was found guilty of murder, kidnapping, and rape, receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. His case was officially archived, meaning he would not be eligible for release. However, the story of Barry and Valmay didn't end in prison. Barry started bragging about his crimes and told a cellmate that he had committed a similar offense. He mentioned the murder of 31-year-old teacher, Helen Marie Fenney, who went missing on October 29th of that year. Investigators later discovered that Valmay was also involved in this incident. Valmay admitted to witnessing her husband murder the teacher Helen, after which they placed her body in the trunk of their car and disposed of it in a landfill near Brisbane. Barry remained silent during police questioning, refusing to provide any information about the second victim, Helen. He seemed to hope to challenge the verdict in Sion's case in the future. However, in 2007, he confessed to murdering Sion and detailing the crime. Valmay endured assaults while in her cell, suffering regular beatings, including a severe head injury from a tin can. To ensure her safety, she was transferred to a more secure correctional facility. During her time there, she converted to Christianity and started to make positive changes in her life. Valmay applied for parole 3 times but was denied each time. In 2007, she divorced her husband, Barry. She also struggled with serious health issues, such as obesity and diabetes. In 2008, her health declined significantly, leading doctors to place her in an induced coma immediately after heart surgery. The police hoped that while she was on her deathbed, she would confess to additional crimes that she and Barry was suspected of, including numerous kidnappings, rapes, and murders in the area. Sadly, she passed away at the age of 64 without regaining consciousness, taking with her all the secrets of their horrific crimes. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jody Jones. Luke Mitchell, born in 1988, was the younger of 2 children. When he was 11, his parents separated, and he stayed with his mother without moving away. The family lived in the small, middle-class town of Eat Houses, Scotland. From a young age, Luke was well-behaved. He enjoyed horseback riding, excelled in school, and had a passion for music. He entered secondary school at St. David. However, during his teenage years, particularly in high school, he began to exhibit unusual behavior. At that time, he met a girl named Jody Jones, who was almost 2 years younger than him. Jody was born in 1989 in another small town in eastern Scotland. The country is generally known for having many small towns located close to one another. Jody was the youngest of 3 children in a middle-class family. Both of her parents worked for the Royal Mail. She was calm, well-mannered, and did well in school. The school director even commented that she had a bright future due to her achievements in class and extracurricular activities. Family was very important to her, and she was a creative person who enjoyed poetry and painting. Jody was close to her eldest sister, Janine. Interestingly, all members of the Jones family had names starting with the letter J, including their parents, James and Judy. The family was decent and appeared genuinely happy until 1998, when the father began experiencing mental health issues and ended his life tragically. This was a devastating blow to the family, and the mother, Judy, had to leave her job to take care of the 3 children. The tragedy affected not only Judy but also the children, who were very worried. Eventually, Janine moved to Mayfield briefly to live with her grandmother, because everything in the house reminded her of the incident. However, After some time, she managed to cope with her problems and returned to her family. Gradually, life returned to normal. Everyone adapted to living without a father, the mother went back to work, and the community supported the family. As a teenager, Joan showed a rebellious streak. She wanted independence and began to experiment with clothes and appearance, listened to heavy rock bands popular at that time, and got herself a piercing. Her mother resisted these changes, particularly when Jodi showed interest in alcohol and prohibited substances. She began experimenting with these substances at an early age. Around the time Jodi met Luke, they were both 14 years old. The two met at school, became friends, started skipping classes together, and began dating in February 2003. They were deeply in love, and even planned to marry. Jodi wrote in her diary that her feelings for Luke were serious and profound, not just a superficial crush. At the start of her relationship, Jodi didn't tell her friends or family about her boyfriend, Luke. For some reason, she kept him a secret. This hidden relationship went on for quite some time until she finally decided to share it. She confided in her older sister, Janine, revealing that she had a close relationship with Luke and felt very strong emotions for him. Janine understood the seriousness of the situation and informed their mother, Judy. Judy was of course shocked by the news, but was afraid of pushing her daughter away from her, so she decided to act very carefully. Judy wanted to meet Luke to understand him better, given Jodi's deep feelings, and asked Jodi to introduce them. In May 2003, Luke returned home with his girlfriend Jodi to meet her family and get to know them better. However, things didn't go as planned. Judy learned from Luke that Jodi was smoking and drinking with her friends, and Judy also discovered she had tried weed. This makes Judy worried about her daughter's increasingly close interactions and relationship with Luke. Even before the meeting, Judy had looked into Luke's background and learned about some of his unusual habits. Many local people had unfavorable words about him, seeing him as independent and daring, and occasionally rude, though he wasn't involved in any criminal activities. After a brief discussion, Judy was convinced that Luke was a bad influence on her daughter and that their relationship was risky. She forbade them from seeing each other and put her daughter under house arrest until June 30th, hoping this would help her focus on finishing the school year without distractions. However, Judy's plan failed. Luke and Jodi continued to meet in secret. Judy found a path Jodi used almost daily to sneak out and spend time with Luke. They would kiss near her home and share their frustrations about Judy's strictness. Luke and Jodi was eagerly waiting for the end of house arrest to spend their summer vacation together. June 30th finally arrived, and Jodi, very much looking forward to it, was thrilled that house arrest would end. She looked forward to seeing Luke and spending time with him freely. As soon as it was 5 p.m., Jodi left home. She planned to meet Luke for an evening together. Judy allowed her to go but set a curfew of 8 p.m. However, she did not return home at the appointed time, and Judy couldn't reach her by phone. Worried that something was wrong, Judy began searching for her daughter. When Judy went to Luke's house, Jodi was not there. Concerned, she asked Luke about her whereabouts, but he said he hadn't seen her that day. She had not shown up for their meet. This seemed unbelievable, as Jodi had eagerly awaited this moment and had hurried to meet him. Judy became angry, suspecting that he was lying. Judy, distraught, did not believe him and demanded he answers, but he insisted he knew nothing. He agreed to accompany Judy to search for she. Luke's parents owned a specially trained dog, so they decided to follow the route she was supposed to have taken. Since there was only one road linking the neighboring towns where they lived, so they searched this route, but did not find she, which was strange. She continued to ignore their calls and messages. Despite this, Judy, Luke, and the dog persisted, keep searching over and over again, but still in vain. Finally, while walking the route again in the dark around 10:30 p.m., the dog picked up a scent in a wooded area and led them there. Luke followed the dog into the forest, using a flashlight. In the distance, he noticed something white on the ground near some walls. As he approached, he made a horrifying discovery. It was Jody's half-naked, disfigured body, tied up. She had been killed in a particularly brutal manner, which deeply shocked both Judy and Luke. Judy became hysterical, trying to aid her daughter, but it was too late. She showed no signs of life, and her body had already cooled. The mother couldn't accept that her daughter was gone. Luke comforted Judy's and called emergency services. Soon after, the police also arrived at the scene and they were extremely shocked by this discovery. It was a literal bloodbath. Such violence had never occurred in this previously quiet area. Who could commit such a cruel act against a girl? The injuries of Jody resembled those of Elizabeth Short, who was murdered in 1947 in Los Angeles. The girl's body was not only cut in half, but her internal organs were removed. Additionally, on her face was a Glasgow smile, which is a knife cup that extends from one ear to the other. This case is one of the most famous yet to be solved. Due to the similarity of injuries, so the case of the murdered Jody Jones was dubbed Black Scotland by some media outlets. This gruesome incident caused widespread panic among residents of both communities. Locals fear that a vicious maniac has appeared in the area and expect new attacks. To calm the public, police needed to urgently solve the case and incarcerate the dangerous criminal before he struck again. The specially trained dog amazed everyone by leading the search party straight to the body. The girl was found in a hidden spot, known only to her, under a tree, where her and a friend's initials were carved. Some witnesses believed this was not a coincidence but a clue. Jody's body had numerous cuts and stab wounds, primarily on her chest, neck, and head. Her arms had many cuts, indicating she actively tried to defend herself. Her neck was so damaged she was nearly decapitated. She was also severely beaten, with her hair pulled out. The girl was raped, and she died from strangulation. Forensic experts investigated the crime scene and discovered a used condom, along with DNA samples from 3 men on Jody's body. These samples were sent to the lab for analysis. Despite public concerns about a serial killer, the police believed the murder was personal, and Jody was not a random victim. Naturally, suspicion fell on her boyfriend, Luke, whom she was supposed to meet. Typically, those close to the victim are involved in such cases. It was believed that Luke might have been the last person to see her. His calm demeanor and indifference to Jody not meeting him as planned raised eyebrows. Why didn't he call or look for her? Perhaps because he already knew she was dead. Luke was considered suspicious by the police, so they decided to investigate him. Although he had no visible injuries, the numerous defensive wounds on Jody suggested she must have left marks on him. His face and body would likely have been scratched. Jody's mother, Judy, noted that her daughter's rebellious behavior began after meeting Luke, and she blamed him for everything, from her daughter's change in style to her daughter's murder. She claimed that Luke's negative influence had drastically changed her daughter. During that time, Jody behaved so recklessly that she had to be put under house arrest. At school, in addition to her behavioral changes, she experimented with illegal substances. Jody's mother, Judy, believed Luke was directly linked to these issues. Judy also argued that the dog didn't lead Luke to the body. She said he knew the location and led the dog straight to the crime scene. She opposed Luke so strongly that she asked him not to attend the funeral, partly to avoid media attention, as his presence at the service would have drawn interest from local newspapers. Rumors spread rapidly, and by the next day, the whole school knew what had happened. There were claims that Luke was involved in the brutal murder. Luke was known for being eccentric and called himself the town madman, but his oddities were never violent. Police suspect Luke is the one who killed Jody, so they obtained a search warrant for his home to gather evidence and bring charges against him. While searching his room, detectives came across a peculiar picture in numerous bottles filled with urine. They didn't understand why he filled them and kept them at home. He did not provide any explanation for this. And this is just one of many strange things police discovered in his home during their investigation. His home was filled with satanic symbols, and he was notably obsessed with the singer Marilyn Manson. From the point of view of the investigation, all of this is not in the suspect's favor. However, could such eccentricities really indicate he was capable of a violent crime? In spite of his peculiar behavior, Luke denied any involvement in the crime. From the moment the police expressed their suspicions, he insisted that he loved Jodi and could never harm her. During his discussion with investigators, he mentioned a hair clip, and this raised suspicion as the hairpin was not seen when her body was discovered. Furthermore, his description of her clothing suggested he saw her later in the day, contradicting his claim that he hadn't seen her after school. According to him, she had different clothes and a hair clip at school, which didn't align with his story. The DNA on the used condom did not match Luke's. However, Luke's DNA was found on Jodi's bra among other unidentified samples. The police did not have enough evidence to charge him, but he was still the main suspect in the murder investigation and was called in for questioning. Investigators also spoke with his parents. Local residents' opinion of him turned very negative, and teachers at the school tried to isolate him from other students out of safety concerns but were unsuccessful. After 2 months, Luke returned to his class, not wanting to study separately. Consequently, the school administration had to suspend Luke from classes for the duration of the investigation. For the next 10 months, Luke remained the sole suspect. The police focused exclusively on him and did not consider other potential suspects. Ultimately, based on circumstantial evidence, Luke, 15 years old, was arrested for the murder of 14-year-old Jodi Jones. He also faced charges for possessing and carrying a knife in a school setting. One of the challenges in the investigation, besides the lack of evidence, was determining the motive for the murder. The police faced an issue because Luke was below the age of criminal responsibility. Later, it was revealed that the police committed several violations. Specifically, they were criticized for interrogating the 15-year-old without any adults present, such as his legal guardians or parents, and without a lawyer. The boy was pressured and forced to confess. During this time, law enforcement was more focused on building the case and finding evidence of Luke's guilt. They visited his home again and conducted another search of his room. His house was searched 3 times in total. Surprisingly, no blood was found in the house. However, many suspicious items were discovered and later used to accuse him of a brutal crime. Among these items, investigators confiscated a large number of Marilyn Manson CDs and copies of Manson's film Doppelhörs. A particular 10-minute scene in the film, where the main character committed a brutal crime against a black dahlia, was of great interest. Many drew parallels between the film and the real tragedy, leading to the belief that Luke was simply imitating his idols. Investigators suspected that Luke might have timed the massacre to coincide with a cult or ritual inspired by his favorite rock bands. He was eventually arrested, bringing relief to the city's residents, who viewed him as a murderer, Satanist, and psychopath, posing a danger to society. His eccentricities were publicly scrutinized, although they had not harmed anyone, until Jodi's murder. Rumors and sensational stories quickly spread. The case was heard in the Supreme Court of Edinburgh. However, Luke denied any involvement in Jodi's death. The prosecution argued that he was guilty of killing his girlfriend Jodi, pointing out that he discovered her body, even though he used a specially trained dog. Jodi's mother claimed that he brought the dog himself. Additionally, a witness reported seeing a man resembling Luke in a khaki jacket with Jodi near the crime scene, hugging, around the time before she passed away. However, This testimony has caused much controversy, as other witnesses reported seeing two men, and the witness ultimately could not positively identify Luke. At the trial, Luke's ex-girlfriend testified that he once threatened her with a knife, which frightened her greatly. However, he claimed he had an alibi, but it was unreliable. Luke's brother stated that on the day of the incident, he was alone in the house watching TV. However, their mother, Corinne, said she was at home with Luke at that time, and the brother was just in his room and mistaken. Despite this, the brother insisted he was alone, watching adult films, which he only did when no one else was home. Eventually, Corinne admitted she had lied, and Luke was indeed not at home. They faced consequences for this, and she was even held accountable. So, where was Luke? He never revealed his whereabouts, and it was impossible to track his phone. The prosecution presented a reconstruction of the events. According to the prosecutor, Luke and Jody met near a tree with their initials a little after 5 p.m. About 50 minutes later, he was seen alone. The prosecution claimed that he was fascinated by the story of the Black Dahlia and had watched a film of the same name, which included a disturbing scene of a massacre. Witnesses mentioned that he occasionally smoked a pipe. Then, he allegedly contemplated acting out something he saw in the film and harmed Jody. It was also revealed that he possessed a small case containing a knife, engraved with Jody's initials and her birth and death years. The case also had a note stating that the best day of he was the one that never came, a quote from Kurt Cobain, who was his idol. While none of this directly proves a crime, but the prosecution interpreted these details as suspicious coincidences, all pointing to he. The prosecutor's office believed Jody had been killed with a particular knife, but the knife vanished and couldn't be found for comparison. Luke couldn't explain its disappearance. Neighbors of Luke testified during the trial that on the evening of Jody's death, Luke burned something in his backyard. The prosecution suspected that this was how he disposed of the clothes he wore during the crime. Witnesses mentioned that the fire had a strange odor. However, when police searched his house, they found nothing significant. They did confiscate a large steel barrel used for burning garbage. In total, 122 items were confiscated in connection to the case. Notably, a new khaki jacket which a witness had seen disappeared from Luke's house. The prosecutor suggested that he burned it to hide blood stains. The jacket, purchased by his mother shortly before the murder, was last seen on him that day and then mysteriously vanished, raising further suspicions. A witness, a friend of Luke, testified at the trial. He claimed to have had a strange conversation with Luke shortly before the murder. Luke allegedly said that the best way to kill someone was by cutting their throat and mentioned that Luke could imagine killing someone. That day, Luke was texting Jody, with their last message exchange occurring between 16:35 and 16:54. After 1700 hours, Luke called the information service to ask for the exact time. This was puzzling because if he was at home, as claimed, he could have just checked his watch. The lawyers argued that there was no evidence against Luke. Besides Luke's DNA from two other men was found at the crime scene. But only one was identified. It belonged to a friend of Janine. The prosecution suggested that these traces were present because Jody wore Janine's shirt. Luke's DNA was on her bras, and her DNA was on his pants, but since they were in an intimate relationship, the presence of their DNA on each other's clothes was considered irrelevant to the murder case. The defense contended that Luke was eccentric, a fact he didn't deny. Yes, he was a rude teenager interested in strange things, but none of these were direct indicators of guilt. The lawyers attempted to demonstrate that he couldn't have committed the crime against his girlfriend. The numerous stab wounds to the throat nearly detached her head from her body. Forensic experts counted about 20 wounds in the neck area alone, while Jody fought back desperately. Luke would have certainly sustained defensive marks. yet no witnesses or police officers noticed any on him during the search. There were no scratches on his face or body. The lawyers argued that he didn't have a motive for murder. He loved his girlfriend and valued their relationship. Why would he murder her, especially on a day when all restrictions imposed by her mother were lifted? They shared a serious romantic relationship filled with tender feelings and rarely argued. It just didn't make sense. The case was highly controversial, ultimately left for the jury to decide. On January 20th, 2005, the jury began their deliberation. After about 5 hours, they concluded that Luke was guilty of first-degree murder. On February 11th, the verdict stated that the 16-year-old would face at least 20 years in prison before eligibility for parole. However, many still doubted his involvement, believing that 2 people were involved in the murder. This thing allowed he to file several appeals, which were denied. Luke's mother had to sell their house and buy a smaller one to afford the legal fees. She fully supports her son and believes in his innocence. In 2019, a fund was established to raise money to support a man named Luke and to file new appeals on his behalf. However, the site hosting the fund eventually blocked it because it violated the site's terms. Despite these setbacks, Luke remained determined. Since 2003, when he was first accused of killing his girlfriend, he has consistently denied involvement. He made it clear that even if he were offered release in exchange for a confession, he would not accept it because he would never harm Jody, his girlfriend. Luke had numerous supporters who, after hearing the guilty verdict in court, distributed flyers throughout the city proclaiming his innocence. So strong was their support that they even considered storming the prison. Their aim was to highlight what they believed to be Luke's wrongful conviction. However, their approach was questionable. Such actions could potentially harm Luke's case, and they also negatively impacted the Jones family, who were unjustly blamed for the situation and even received threats. In May 2007, the controversial trial resulted in the creation of a documentary about the case, which renewed interest in Luke's case. Moreover, this film revealed numerous irregularities committed by the police in charge of the investigation. Initially, the police considered Luke innocent, although they investigated him as a suspect. However, as more was learned about him, they found unconventional and unknown aspects. Most of the townspeople had a clearly negative opinion. Amid rumors and the extraordinary behavior of the town's eccentric, the investigation ceased to consider other people as suspects. All the evidence was circumstantial. Even Jody's wounds, initially believed to resemble movie cuts, did not match so much. In fact, it was even questioned whether Luke was really a fan of Satanism and Marilyn Manson. He just followed some unpopular trends of his teenage years. To prove his innocence, Luke agreed to take a polygraph test on April 25, 2012. He passed the test successfully. 2 months later, the mother of he also underwent the polygraph test, and experts confirmed that both passed flawlessly. The documentary explored a theory that the murder might have been committed by a student who had written an essay about the murder of a girl in the woods a few weeks before Jody's death. A friend of this student saw him shortly after the crime and noticed scratches on his face. Luke's family believes the investigation overlooked a crucial piece of evidence: condoms containing unknown male DNA. No DNA from Luke was found. They argue that the motive for the murder was rape, with the rapist attacking she and dragging her into the woods. They feel the investigation should focus more on this angle. Additionally, they claimed that when Jody's mother came to Luke's house, he had not yet showered, yet there was no blood on him. They argue that if he were the killer, he would have showered and changed clothes immediately to wash off any blood. Years ago, the crime scene was vandalized with red graffiti referencing Jody's murder. The message included a different name, suggesting that another person might be the murderer. This graffiti is believed to have been painted by Luke's supporters to assert his innocence. Luke's family hired 2 private detectives who identified several suspects, with Mark Kane among them. Mark was a local drug addict who died suddenly in May 2018 at age 38. Witnesses saw him at the crime scene on the day of the murder, with a scratched face and known to carry a knife. He claimed the scratches were from falling into bushes, but no one believed him given the context of Jody's murder. However, despite his suspicious background, all suspects, including Mark, were eventually interrogated and cleared from the list. The family of Jody is certain that the person who killed their daughter is Luke, the one currently in prison. They have no doubt about his guilt. Meanwhile, Luke's family continues their pursuit of justice. Almost 2 decades have passed since his imprisonment, and his legal team has accused investigators of multiple violations, notably the absence of forensic analysis on several DNA samples from Jody, particularly those related to allegations of rape. This significant oversight has cast doubt on the conviction. Luke's lawyers are determined to overturn the sentence. Now 35 years old, Luke might be eligible for parole in 2025. However, he reportedly failed a random test this year. By regulation, after this point, the opportunity for parole will be postponed for another 3 years. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of a fair Elodie Kulik. At around midnight on January 11, 2002, the French Rescue Service received a heartbreaking call. A woman, her voice panicked, screamed that she had been kidnapped. Other voices could be heard in the background before the noise increased, and the attackers took over the phone, cutting off the call forever. The call left the rescue service extremely worried, but the operators were unable to gather any useful information. Attempts to call the number back were unsuccessful as it was either out of coverage or switched off. The situation led to an investigation into one of the most unusual crimes the police had ever encountered. They had no information, not even the name of the caller. The only option was to investigate the mobile phone number, but at the time, the technology could not accurately track the caller's location, so the technology was of no help. In the early morning hours of January 11, 2002, at around 7 a.m., a random driver in the rural area of Picardy made a disturbing discovery. He noticed a car that appeared to have been abandoned in a ditch, with damage to the vehicle and the passenger door open. Concerned that the car had been stolen and abandoned, he called the police. When asked if anyone else was nearby, he replied that there was no one around. After making the call, he continued on his way. Since it was a remote area, it took some time for the police to arrive, and they arrived at the scene around 8 a.m. A Peugeot 106 was found upside down in a ditch, which seemed unusual as there was a clear and safe stretch of highway nearby, making it unlikely that it had ended up there by accident. There were no signs of braking or skidding on the road, suggesting the car had intentionally left the sidewalk at a high rate of speed. The keys were still in the ignition, but there was no sign of the driver or any passengers. Police used the license plate to identify the owner. A fair Elodie Kulik, a 24-year-old bank employee who lived nearby. While investigating the abandoned car, her bag was discovered inside, raising concerns for police. The bag contained her money, cards, and keys, but she had disappeared without a trace. Police went to the bank where the affair worked. Bank employees told them she had not shown up for work that day. They then contacted the local hospital, but there were no reports of any victims matching Affair's description. That morning, Affair's father contacted the police to report her absence. He explained that he had tried calling her cell phone, but she did not answer and did not make contact, which was very unusual for her. Normally, if she had any problems, she would always notify her family if she would be late or unable to come home. However, this time, she did not respond and it appeared that she had disappeared. Police began searching the area where her car was found and decided to release a photo to raise public awareness of her disappearance. On the morning of Saturday, January 12, 2002, a worker from a nearby farm went to a landfill 12 kilometers from the station. In the distance, he saw what he initially thought was a tree trunk. However, as he got closer, he was horrified to discover the disfigured body of a woman. He quickly called the police to report his horrific discovery. When the officers arrived at the scene, they were confronted with a horrifying sight: the partially burned and disfigured body of a young woman, showing clear signs of a violent death. Tests are needed to confirm the identity of the body. The body was discovered nearly 6 kilometers away from where her car was found the previous day, which was unusual. Police noted that this area is not frequented by many visitors. It is isolated and not a tourist destination. This suggests that the suspect is likely a local resident. The crime scene was secured and thoroughly searched for evidence. The gendarme discovered a fresh cigarette, but that may have been discarded by the potential killer. Additionally, a condom containing male fluid was located next to the body. Police focused on finding tire tread marks from any vehicle that might have brought the affair to this location, but they were unsuccessful in locating any. All collected evidence was sent to forensic scientists for analysis. On January 12, the police contacted Affair's parents to inform them of the sad news. When the family learned of the incident, the parents were devastated by their daughter's death. Overwhelmed with grief, the mother attempted to end her life. She survived but fell into a coma, remaining in that state for years until her death in 2011. The desperate father was determined to find his daughter's killer. Affair was a highly intelligent and educated young woman. She studied law in northern France and later returned to her hometown of Péronne. At just 23, she was offered a position at a bank, where she excelled and quickly became the youngest director in the bank's history. She took great pride in her career accomplishments. In addition to her career success, Affair was also very beautiful, with blonde hair and blue eyes. The forensic examination of Affair's car determined that it was traveling at a low speed. There were no signs of collision with another vehicle, raising the possibility that someone inside the car might have deliberately driven it into the ditch. When police checked Affair's mobile phone, they found a call to the local rescue service shortly after midnight. The call ended suddenly after she managed to scream. Police retrieved a 26-second recording filled with noise and unidentified male voices. While this recording did not provide clear evidence, it was notable because it indicated male involvement during the incident. The autopsy results showed that Affair died painfully from strangulation, and DNA evidence indicated that she had been raped. However, this DNA did not match any profiles in the database, suggesting her attacker had no prior criminal history. Police believed that the suspect's careless handling of the DNA would eventually lead him to reveal himself again. However, this assumption raised concerns, as it could result in another victim, so they could not afford to wait. Police organized street patrols and collected DNA samples from all male acquaintances of the affair. If these efforts did not lead to results, the search would expand to the surrounding area near the crime scene. The instincts of the gendarmes proved correct. Just 10 days after finding Affair's body, a police commissioner from another precinct arrested a man named Kirill, who had a history of sexual violence. He was in the area on the night of the disappearance and later attacked another woman, who reported the incident. While Kirill admitted to harassing this woman, claiming it was just harmless flirting, he denied any involvement in Affair's murder. The investigation of Kirill involved checking his car, which had scratches containing gray paint. This paint matched the color of the Peugeot 106 driven by Affair. DNA samples were taken from Kirill for comparison. However, the analysis showed that the paint did not match Affair's car, and Kirill's DNA did not match any evidence from the crime scene. As a result, Kirill was released, and further inquiries into Affair's acquaintances did not produce any new leads. The case has no prime suspect and no new leads. It seems the investigation has reached a dead end. Meanwhile, Affair's grieving father Jackie remains closely involved in the investigation and begins his own investigations. In order to quickly find the culprit, he ensures that the case is widely reported in the media, hoping that this will lead to new leads. On April 15, 2002, 3 months after Affair's body was discovered, new clues emerged in the case. The police received a detailed report from audio experts who had analyzed the recording of Affair's last call to emergency services. The experts carefully filtered out the background noise and identified 2 distinct male voices among the cries for help. One voice was calm and tried to reassure the victim, while the other, more aggressive, argued that she needed to be killed. They noted that the attackers had a heavy accent typical of an area called Picard, which happened to be close to where Affair's body was found. However, this information did not make the police's task any easier. They still lacked data, and the search for a new suspect was slow, with the assumption that 2 men were involved. After 6 months of unproductive investigation, the police department received a call from a farmer in Turtree. On July 8, 2002, he reported discovering a young girl's body on a haystack while heading to work. The shocking scene also revealed another mutilated body. Forensic experts, horrified by the brutality, noted that her limbs were dislocated and her body showed signs of having been run over by a vehicle. This location was only 30 kilometers away from where Affair had previously been found. The victim was identified as Patricia, a clerk who was known for riding her bicycle. She had gone missing just days before the farmer's discovery. Notably, similar items were found at this crime scene. Patricia was recognized as a beautiful girl who worked in a restaurant in Alberta. It was clear to police that these cases were linked, as such violent incidents had never occurred in this previously peaceful area. Witnesses who saw Patricia shortly before her death reported that a black sedan was following her bicycle on the street. At the time, they did not think much of it. Unfortunately, this was all the information the police could gather. The witnesses could not remember the car's make, model, or license plate. However, the police believed this crime was connected to a previous case, and new information about the black sedan helped narrow down the search. The media quickly picked up the story, increasing public fear and spreading rumors about a possible serial killer. The police's struggle to solve the case led to the discovery of a third body on August 21, 2002. In Villa Brentoni, a van was found abandoned near the railroad tracks. And inside it, police discovered a third young girl who had been wounded by a bladed weapon and died from internal bleeding. Unlike the earlier victims, this girl's identity was unknown because no one had reported her missing. The police spoke with local residents and learned about the parents of a daughter who had not returned home the night before. They thought she was out with friends. Upon investigation, they recognized the victim as their 18-year-old daughter, Crestel. She was killed approximately 40 kilometers from where the first victim was found. In just 7 months, the gendarmes encountered 3 similar murders of young girls, each caught by the criminals at night on roads between settlements. The locations of these crimes on the map created a triangle that the media called the Triangle of Death. This situation caused public anxiety to escalate, leading residents to hold a memorial procession to express their fear for safety. Even with more police patrols and checkpoints, attempts to gather new evidence and testimonies from other potential victims were unsuccessful. However, by the end of November 2002, the investigation into the second Patricia victim's murder produced new leads. DNA found on the victim's clothing identified a suspect named Jean-Paul Conti, marking an important breakthrough for the police. Police arrived to question Conti, a man who had served 17 years in prison for a series of rapes. When he saw the police, he was very surprised. He remained calm and did not attract the attention of those around him. His home was located in a triangle of death, which included the locations where the 3 victims were found. Conti was arrested in the early morning of November 25th, but police needed more evidence to link him to the murders. His DNA was only found on the clothing of the 2nd victim, and there were no traces on the 1st and 3rd victims. The investigation later determined that he was only involved in the murders of the 2nd and 3rd victims, resulting in a life sentence. In addition, it was confirmed that he could not have been involved in the murder of Affair, as he was in prison at the time. This indicates that the cases of Affair and the other victims are unrelated, revealing that there are at least 2 killers operating in the area, targeting young girls. The investigation resumed with meticulous efforts to identify all mobile devices that may have been in the vicinity where the body and a gray Peugeot 106 were discovered. A total of 14,000 signals were recorded and needed analysis. Specialists undertook a massive task that included reviewing over 600 sent messages, listening to more than 10,000 conversations, collecting 5,500 DNA samples from found mobile phones, and conducting thousands of interviews. Police examined over 500 theories related to the crime, but none provided any leads. The department received numerous anonymous letters identifying various individuals as potential killers. Police followed up on these leads, which consumed a lot of resources, but ultimately did not advance the case. After a lengthy period, police offered a reward of €60,000 for information leading to the capture of the real criminal. However, this also failed to yield results, leaving the police at a standstill. 9 years after Affair's body was discovered, a new police officer joined the investigation. He was a young specialist with a fresh perspective and new skills. He suggested a method that focuses on analyzing the DNA found at the crime scene to search for close relatives of the DNA's owner, rather than just the owner themselves. This innovative technique was used for the first time in France in this case and proved to be a significant breakthrough in the investigation. Progress was made in November 2011 when police identified a relative of the killer. Evidence strongly suggested that the killer was part of the Wired family. It was believed that the elderly man was not involved, meaning that the perpetrator was likely his son. The Wired family had lived in the area for nearly 50 years, and their son, Gregory Wired, was a 23-year-old plumber at the time of the murder. To protect the information, police kept his identity a secret for several weeks. However, they were disappointed to discover that Gregory Wired had died in a traffic accident shortly after the Affair murder in November 2003, which was officially ruled a fatal accident. The Gregory's death shortly after Affair's murder explained why his DNA was not found during random sampling of local residents from 2002 to 2010. His profile closely matched the description of the criminal. Gregory, known to his friends as a motorsport racing enthusiast, was cheerful but had a violent streak. He abused alcohol and often lost control when intoxicated, making him prone to aggression. To conduct a DNA examination of the suspect, authorities decided to exhume his body from the cemetery for testing. The results revealed a complete match, identifying one of the killers. The next step for the gendarmerie was to find the owner of the second voice from Affair's last call recording. They began by investigating Gregory's immediate circle. The police aimed not only to piece together the events, but also to ensure that no further threats existed for other young women. While only traces of Gregory were found on the condom at the crime scene, another male voice was clearly captured on the recording. Police then investigated Willie Bardon, a former plumber and bartender who was a close friend of Gregory's. They had many interests in common, and a recording confirmed that it was his voice. Willie lived nearby, and police knew of his past allegations of violence against women, although those incidents did not result in legal action. Witnesses reported that he had chased them in his car. Despite his troubled past, he had no criminal record, which meant that his DNA was not in the police database. He vehemently denied any involvement in the crime and claimed that the police were mistaken. Ultimately, his DNA was not found at the crime scene. In late March 2013, Gregory's ex-girlfriend assisted police in identifying the voices of Gregory and Willie by listening to a recorded phone call. Willie, who had a recognizable accent, was recognized by people who knew him. Despite this evidence, Willie denied any involvement in Affair's death, maintaining his innocence. Some described him as a kind man, a caring husband and father, while others painted a different picture, noting his impulsive behavior, extramarital affairs, alcohol abuse, and repeated advances toward women. Nevertheless, the case against him went to court. The prosecution's case rested largely on the identification of Gregory's girlfriend's voice and several others. Despite the lack of substantial evidence, the court ruled in favor of the prosecution. In 2019, 45-year-old Willie Bardon was convicted of gang rape, kidnapping, and murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison. While in custody, he attempted to end his life to prove his innocence. His lawyers quickly filed an appeal, and which was accepted. They argued that the voice on the crucial recording belonged to someone else. Experts analyzed the recording but could not confirm whether it was actually his voice, as it was unclear and discontinuous. This uncertainty raised doubts about the evidence against him. As a result, his conviction was appealed and Willie was acquitted due to insufficient evidence. He was released from prison on September 25, 2020. The story continues. A new trial began, and on July 1, 2021, Willie was convicted again and sentenced to 30 years in prison. His attorney appealed the decision, but the appeal was rejected. The defense team expressed their commitment to doing everything possible to free this innocent man, but he remains in custody.